Good evening. I'll go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the Watershed Committee and Special Board of Directors meeting from Marin Water on tonight, June 18th, 2026. Terry, can I please have a roll call?
Good evening. Director Ranjit Kush.
Here.
Vice Chair Diana Mayer.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
Chair Matt Sampson.
Here.
And currently not present is Director Larry Russell.
Great. We appreciate everyone's patience tonight. While we started a few minutes late, the traffic was an issue throughout the Bay Area, so we thank you for making it here, and I'm hoping that some other additional people are able to come. Terry, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Oh, that's not on the agenda.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll go ahead and to move for an adoption of the agenda. If I could please have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Terry, roll call.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayer.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Chair Sampson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to our regular items. Item 3A, approving the minutes of the Watershed meeting from 19 March of this year. If I have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Terry, roll call.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayer.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
And Chair Sampson.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to our next regular schedule item, item 3B. But before we get going in tonight's presentation, I want to take a minute and address the crowd here and the constituents that are attending both in person and then virtually. First, I think we owe a big thank you to our board secretary and our communication and public affairs manager for the efforts that allowed tonight to be held here in San Rafael. Thank you. And also thank you to the city of San Rafael for their hospitality and allowing us to hold this significant meeting at their facility. Tonight's venue was selected with intention and purpose. It's this board's priority to ensure we maintain an open and transparent process, one that allows for anyone who is interested to be able to participate and contribute to it. We also feel it's important that we are all able to be in the same room, respectfully listening directly to our neighbors and community members. In fact, the last time we gathered in this space was February 29th of 2024, when we heard from the community and supported the adoption of our recreation management feasibility study. As most know, that process resulted in the development of 2 pilot studies that were identified to move forward in the fall of the same year. Both pilots were legally challenged, and ultimately the Class 1 e-bike pilot moved forward and is continuing today. The legal challenges and the respective outcomes provided an inflection point that allowed for an opportunity to better understand the desires of the community and, more importantly, the concerns about possible impacts and issues generated by changes in trail use. I want the room to know and the community to know that we listened and we heard and continue to hear you today. We heard you when you identified the importance of a full environmental review and not selecting pilot projects or utilizing the exemption process throughout CEQA. We heard you when you said you did not have enough time to evaluate which trails were selected to move forward. We heard you when you said there was not enough opportunities to participate. Your comments did not fall on deaf ears, and I'm hoping you see that evidence of that during tonight's presentation. I'd also like to take the opportunity to recognize the Herculean lift performed by our Director of Watershed Resources, Sean Horn, his staff of rangers, resource managers, specifically Carl, ecologists, biologists, and our consultant team at Ascent. You listened to board directive, you took community input, and we're looking forward to your presentation this evening. Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear from a community that includes diverse recreational backgrounds, yet also includes a common respect and love for Mount Tamalpais and our watershed. At the end of the day, it's in our collective best interest to preserve the gift our generation received from those who came before us. And as we heard from Matt Circle during our last watershed meeting, this gift not only provided a water source and one of the most diverse ecological areas in the state, it also provides, and has provided since its inception, all of the residents with the opportunity to recreate and spend time in nature. One of the bonds that contributes to this collective strength in Marin County is the common desire to encourage and participate in outdoor recreation. This bond strengthens our community, and shame on us if we let it divide us. I ask that tonight everyone remain respectful of those in the room, regardless of different perspectives. We can learn from each other and drive towards an outcome that allows for equitable, safe, sustainable, and appropriate recreational opportunities for hikers, equestrians, and bike riders. Lastly, while tonight might seem like an ongoing challenge that could appear unsolvable, it's important to remember that this is not new. and and has commonality to prior user conflict challenges that were worked through and resulted in amenable outcomes for the hiking and equestrian communities. We have learned from that experience and can apply similar packages to the challenges we face today. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and start the presentation. Sean.
Thank you, board members. Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources. I'm joined with Adam Lewandowski from Ascent Environmental and Carly Blanchard, our environmental planner for the district. We've prepared a presentation for you tonight that we're going to walk through, and we're going to hand it back and forth as we go. So one moment, please. All right, so this evening we're going to talk about the background of this planning effort, talk about some of the community engagement activities that have been going on, and then look through the planning scenarios that we discussed with the community and how those have been refined based on the input, and then talk about next steps. So just to be clear tonight what this presentation is and isn't, we are reviewing public input received. We are considering revisions to the scenarios and elements and concepts based on that input. We're continuing to listen to the interests and concerns. We're confirming a preferred planning scenario this evening. However, we're not making a final decision, not approving any changes to current operations, but we are continuing to advance this effort. So we wanted to follow up on Matt Circle's presentation at the last Watershed Committee and just go a little bit deeper into what our 1985 management plan entailed. So at that time, this was our first trails management plan for the district, and some of the issues that were of focus related around hiking and equestrian use on the mountain. There was also concerns around how bikes were accessing fire roads, and there was concerns around how roads could input sediment into our reservoirs and water quality. There was deep discussion and interest in developing principles around recreation on the watershed and really focusing on consistently protecting our water quality and natural resources. Interestingly, when we looked back at the public record and pulled out some of the public comments, you start to see that there's some sharp differences in how people were thinking about allocating various trails. When you read through the comments, you saw that there were concerns around how trails were going to be impacted by equestrian use, how horses could be hard on trails and difficult to maintain. There was also concerns that horses couldn't share a trail with a hiker safely. And these were really the core components of the 1985 management plan, and it really drove the district to designating an official trail system for hiking and equestrian access. It identified 17 miles of equestrian trails to help alleviate that conflict between hikers and equestrians. It looked at closing trails and roads that had serious erosion problems, and then it did reopen some of our fire roads to bicycle access. Later in 1995, we actually came up with, we hired our first resource management staff to really focus in on the natural resources of Mount Tamalpais. The 2005 management plan was the next management plan the district developed, and that was 20 years later. The priorities had similarities, but were somewhat focused on the protection of our watershed from a water quality and natural resource perspective. There was a lot of interest and discussion around our social trail network and how to manage that. There was concerns around or interest in bringing forward new roads and trails maintenance techniques to protect our watershed, and it helped us evaluate our roads and trails across the watershed. One thing that wasn't incorporated as directly into this plan was kind of recreation priorities and thinking about how people were using it. The public comments during this period and this planning effort really focused in on water quality protection, natural resource protection. However, there were still concerns around what types of trails should be on the mountain and how they should be used, what the width of those trails should be or those roads, and how folks would safely use those. Out of that planning effort, the district developed a 2005 management plan, which we've been operating under for the past number of years, that identified a system-wide road and trail designation system, which we've talked a little bit about throughout this planning process. It identified road improvement projects that could move forward to protect water quality, and those have been implemented largely. And we started this planning effort actually by going through some of the projects that have been implemented by this 2005 management plan 2 or 3 Watershed Committee meetings ago. We also established a signage and outreach program through this effort and determined that fire roads are our primary source of sediment into our reservoirs. And so it drove a lot of our road improvements on the watershed, specifically in salmon-bearing streams as well. It found that trails had limited water quality impacts due to the size of those facilities. And we came up with a number of goals that really focused in on how we protect the watershed and operate it for the service of our community. Now in 2013 or 2012 and 2022, the district went out on the watershed and actually talked to our community members and asked them how they were feeling and how they were experiencing the watershed. Some of the interesting components that came out of this were folks' thoughts on how our road conditions were. And so you see that about 84% of folks thought they were in good to great condition. In regards to our trail condition, there was kind of consistency from the two surveys that about 87% in the most recent survey felt that our trails were in good condition. Interactions with other visitors had a high percentage of good to great, and there was generally a safety awareness that they felt safe while visiting the watershed. Really important components, and this was great feedback to get directly from the visitors of the watershed through intercept surveys. Now this slide you've seen before, we've been bringing it through the planning process as we've been looking at key areas to investigate. And so we'll remind the community that what we've been talking about as we've been advancing these scenarios are really focusing in on watershed restoration and social trail priorities, identifying priority areas for enhancing habitat and biodiversity on the watershed. We've been evaluating opportunities for doing road to trail conversions to improve habitat conditions. And we've been looking to update our criteria for how we manage and steward our Mount Tamalpais watershed. We're looking to update the trail classification and designation system through this process, really looking at where bikes may have an opportunity to be on trails and how we manage that. Looking at what design standards can be developed and incorporated into our update and what environmental protection measures can come forward. We're also looking at building out our visitor engagement and outreach strategy. So we've talked a lot about this through the feasibility study and ways that we can continue to bolster our trail stewardship program as well as our trail education and safety efforts through our volunteer program. And also looking to develop a monitoring and adaptive management approach for this. With that background, I'm going to provide it to Carly to start to provide a summary of our community engagement efforts to date.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, directors. Carly Blanchard, Environmental Planner. Tonight, I'll walk us through the community engagement that has been a central focus of the RTMP update process. Through a variety of outreach activities, we have worked to gather input from a broad range of watershed visitors and stakeholders, and these following slides summarize those efforts to date. We kicked off the outreach process with 2 community workshops held in November of 2025, and approximately 180 people attended over the 2 days, providing feedback on plan goals, concerns, social trail priorities, visitor management, access opportunities, and engagement strategies. We used a variety of engagement tools, including a survey, discussion prompts, and interactive exercises to gather input from participants. The input was summarized and shared at the December 2025 Watershed Committee meeting. In addition to the workshop-based engagement, the district hosted a series of community site walks. These site visits provided an opportunity for community members to experience existing conditions firsthand, share perspectives, and explore opportunities for future restoration and improvements to the road and trail system. We intentionally selected different locations throughout the watershed to expose participants to a variety of trails, conditions, habitats, visitor experiences, and management challenges. Each site walk focused on different topics and highlighted how planning considerations can vary across the watershed. We were also pleased to see participation from a diverse range of watershed visitors, including hikers, dogs, walkers, runners, equestrians, anglers, and cyclists. Our first site walk was held on Mountaintop and Otero Trail in January of 2026. It was attended by approximately 70 participants, and staff led discussions on existing trail classifications, current uses, environmental conditions, and how the 2005 RTMP guides management of the road and trail network. The second site walk brought participants to Madrone and Pumpkin Ridge trails, as well as the Lake Lagunitas area. This site walk focused not only on the road and trail system, but also on visitor facilities and stewardship opportunities. Discussions included accessibility, outdoor education, and ways to enhance the visitor experience while continuing to protect watershed resources. Next slide. The third site walk focused on Sunnyside Trail and Rocky Ridge Fire Road. Staff highlighted natural resource considerations and potential road to trail conversion opportunities. Participants discussed how access, restoration, and resource protection can be balanced within the watershed. This sidewalk also accommodated equestrians and cyclists traveling the route on horseback and bicycle, providing valuable opportunities to discuss shared use, trail experience, and access considerations from multiple perspectives. To accompany the community sidewalks, the district developed an interactive planning map to make the sidewalk information available to a broader audience. This map functions as a virtual sidewalk, allowing users to explore photo points along select roads and trails in the watershed. Each photo point includes images and descriptions that highlight either existing condition, management challenges, natural resource considerations, or planning topics being evaluated as part of the RTMP update. The map is intended as an educational engagement tool to help community members better understand the watershed and the RTMP planning process. And then finally, in May, the district hosted a second community workshop attended by approximately 120 participants. The workshop was organized around 3 illustrative planning scenarios representing different combinations of restoration, access, and management concepts. Attendees represented a broad range of interests, including environmental advocates, equestrians, cyclists, and other watershed visitors. The purpose was not to select a final scenario, but rather to gather feedback on the various approaches, better understand community priorities, and help inform development of a preferred planning scenario. And now I'll go ahead and pass it off to Adam from Ascent Environmental to discuss the scenarios and input received at the May workshop. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Adam Lewandowski, the Conservation and Recreation Planning Director at Ascent. And as Carly mentioned, we shared 3 different road and trail scenarios for feedback at that community workshop. So I'll summarize each of those scenarios and then talk through some of the community feedback that we received. And these scenarios are really intended to lay out the realm of possibilities within the road and trail system. They acknowledge that we're not starting from a blank slate. There are many roads and trails on the watershed. They've been there for years, developed over time for many different purposes. And so these scenarios look for ways to improve the existing road and trail system, but we're not looking to recreate or redesign the entire system. Each of these scenarios included a mix of different restoration approaches, road and trail access changes, as well as different specific road and trail management approaches like directional trails or alternative days for different types of users. The intent of these scenarios was really to gather feedback from the community, to facilitate discussions between different user groups, different members of the communities, and to consider all the options that are possible with the road and trail system. As Carly mentioned, the intent wasn't to select one of these scenarios to move forward with, but really to combine the best elements from any scenario to create that preferred planning scenario. With all of these scenarios, our goal was to achieve a net environmental benefit through a combination of restoration and access changes. And a simple way to look at a net environmental benefit is to consider the number of miles of roads and trails that are restored and compare that to the number of miles that would have access changes. So we paired up different levels of restoration with different levels of access to ensure that every scenario had more restoration than access changes. So this included a scenario with a lower amount of access, lower amount of restoration, medium access, medium restoration, and one with a higher amount of access and higher restoration. There's a lot of information in these scenarios. I'll go through them pretty briefly. We're happy to answer any questions, but the full details of each of the scenarios are on the district's webpage. If anybody wants to take a look, everything that was presented at the community workshop is available there. Next slide. So this map shows the scenario with the lowest amount of access changes and the lowest amount of restoration. All of these scenarios included a proposal to designate a watershed protection area, generally in the location shown in green on the map. And this would establish about a 2,500 acre area, roughly from Ridgecrest Boulevard down to the west side of Kent Lake, where no future recreational access development would occur. This scenario also includes just over 29 miles of road and trail restoration. So of that, that would include about 18 miles of the complete decommissioning and restoration of existing non-system routes, as well as road to trail conversions and other approaches. The specific trails that are proposed for restoration in this scenario are shown as they kind of look like dotted black lines. They're trails with little black X's over them. And then the restoration would also occur in these 2 areas shown in the map, in the gray areas. Those are areas that have a high concentration of non-system routes and some sensitive resources. This scenario would also include over 11 miles of restoration from road to trail conversions. So that would involve taking an existing road, narrowing the roadbed, restoring habitat along the edges of it, incorporating drainage improvements and erosion prevention to improve habitat, improve water quality, narrow the roadbed, but still allow access along that narrower trail corridor. This scenario included access changes along about 23.7 miles of roads and trails, and that's mostly changes in the designation of existing roads and trails to allow additional uses. So the access changes are shown on this map as well. The dashed green lines are proposed hiking and biking trails. The dashed blue lines are proposed multi-use trails that would allow hiking, bicycling, and equestrians. And then there's one dashed brown line where a new proposed hiking-only trail is considered. This scenario also had the most trails with specific management approaches. So of those access changes, there's about 22.6 miles of trails that would allow bicycle access. And under this scenario, every trail that allowed bicycle access would only allow that access on alternating days. So for example, bikes could be on the trail on even dates and hikers or equestrians on odd dates. In the community feedback we received at the workshop, this was generally the least supported of the scenarios. Some community members did like the lower level of access, but wanted to see more restoration. And in general, there wasn't a whole lot of support for that management approach of applying those alternating days to every bicycle trail. The next scenario is the medium access and medium restoration scenario. It includes that same proposed watershed protection area. And this one includes almost 54 miles of road and trail restoration. So that would include 41 miles of complete decommissioning and restoration, as well as about 12.6 miles of road to trail conversion. It includes access changes along about 38 miles of roads and trails. And again, that's mostly redesignating existing roads and trails to allow additional uses. But it also proposes adopting and improving about 9 miles of existing non-system routes to make them more sustainable and incorporate them into the system. And it also includes 4 miles of proposed new trail construction to provide important connections or experiences that visitors are seeking. A little over 10 miles in this scenario were proposed for those specific management approaches, and that included designating alternating days for bike use and other use on some of the most popular and more constrained trails. And in the community feedback, this had a little more support than the low access scenario. There was more support for the management approaches under this scenario. People liked the idea of focusing those management approaches rather than applying them to all the bike trails. And then in terms of specific trail proposals, redesignating the North Side Trail for hiking and biking use got the most support at the community workshop, followed by the proposed Kent Lake and New Paradigm hiking and biking trail. But there were a fair number of community members who did not support those proposals. And then redesignating Sunnyside Trail as multiple use had the most people that did not support it, but there was also a fair amount of support for that one as well. And then the last scenario is the high access and higher restoration scenario. It has the same watershed protection area, and this includes over 60 miles of road and trail restoration. Almost 47 miles of that would be complete decommissioning and restoration, with about 13.5 miles of road and trail conversions. And then it would include access changes along about 42.6 miles of road and trail, again, mostly affecting existing, redesignating existing roads and trails. But it also includes a proposal to adopt and improve just under 9 miles of existing non-system routes, and it included about 6 miles of new trail construction, primarily in the Kent Lake area. This scenario had the least management approaches, with about 6.5 miles of trail that had management approaches, including alternating days along a few of the more constrained or more popular trails, and about 2.5 miles of trails that would have single direction use at Tucker Trail and Pilot Knob. This generally had the most support from workshop attendees. People liked the higher level of restoration, the higher level of access, and they also liked the more targeted use of those specific management approaches. And then we had feedback on some of the specific proposals. Again, the designating the North Side Trail for hiking and biking use was the most supported, along with redesignating sections of Pumpkin Ridge for multiple use and providing a new hiking and biking trail at Kent Lake. And some of the trail proposals that had the most people that did not support them included designating Tucker Trail and Pilot Knob as multiple use trails. So to summarize the community feedback from the last workshop, again, generally more support for those scenarios that had more restoration and more access. And the graph on the right side of the screen is the results of one of the survey questions where we asked people which of the scenarios they felt best met the intent of the Road and Trail Management Plan update. So the blue are people that felt it met the intent, the red are people that felt it didn't. And so you can see there was generally more support for the scenarios with higher access and higher restoration. There was mixed feedback on that proposed watershed protection area. Some people really liked the idea of preserving that most intact part of the watershed over the long term, but others were concerned about the loss of future recreation access opportunities in that area. And then there was limited support for those more specific trail management approaches like alternating days or single direction trails. We did hear concerns from hikers and equestrians that by allowing bike use on one day and hiking and equestrian on the other, that they could lose access to trails they can currently access every day. And then we also had some questions and concerns about how we'd educate visitors about those management approaches and how we'd enforce them. And then there was, of course, a number of specific trail concepts that had limited support that I'd mentioned already. So that was a high-level summary of the community input. We did receive a lot more detailed and nuanced input, and so anybody that wants to dig into the details can go to the district's website. We have the web address on the slide. We have a report that summarizes all the community input with graphs kind of breaking down the results of every activity and every survey question, as well as all the written comments that were provided in the survey. So since that community workshop, we've been going through all of that community input, reconsidering the different scenarios, and using that information to develop a preliminary preferred scenario. So we'll talk through that next as a draft for your consideration. And consistent with that community feedback, this preferred scenario includes that high level of restoration. There was that mixed feedback on the watershed protection area, but that is carried forward really as a way to protect that most intact, undeveloped portion of the watershed. And then there were also several trails that were considered in the scenarios that we're not planning to carry forward. And these are ones that either didn't get a whole lot of proactive support, that didn't generate a lot of interest and excitement from the community, or trails where there was a lot of concerns raised or a lot of people that didn't support them. And so this includes Tucker Trail, Pilot Knob, Fish Gulch Trail, and Concrete Pipe Trail.
And as we go forward in the next set of slides, we're going to go through kind of the preferred scenario, but we've divided it into the components of it. And we've put a slide after each component to allow for discussion of the board. So if you have any comments or questions as Adam advances through this, just let us know.
Great. So I'll walk through the elements of the preferred scenario. And again, this would serve as the basis for the RTMP update. As Sean mentioned, there's a lot of information here, so we'll pause for committee questions and discussions as we go. But as we think about the watershed, there are a lot of ways that we could subdivide it. But from a visitor use and an access perspective, there are really these three main large areas that have different levels of uses and different characteristics. The area that we're showing here on the map is the Mount Tamalpais area in blue. That generally includes everything that's south or east of the Bolinas-Fairfax Road. And this receives most of the visitor use in the watershed. It has most of the existing roads and trails, most of the access infrastructure, and it has the highest density of existing roads, trails, and non-system routes in the watershed. When you add all those up, there's about 2.1 miles of road or trail for every 100 acres in this area. The Pine Mountain area that's shown in that kind of orange or brown color is also an important destination for visitors, but it receives a lot less use than the Mount Tam area. And the existing density of roads and trails in that area is less than half of what it is in the Mount Tam area. And then there's the watershed protection area that I've mentioned several times. And this is the least developed portion of the watershed. It has very little existing visitor access. And the density of roads and trails in that area is less than half of what it is in the Pine Mountain area and less than a quarter of what it is in the Mount Tam area. So in the preferred scenario, we propose designating that watershed protection area as an area that would still allow the district to carry out operations, land and water management, things like forest management, water infrastructure improvements, but it would not include any new trails or access infrastructure. And the intent is really to protect the largest area of intact, unfragmented habitat and preserve the undeveloped nature of this part of the watershed. Overall, the preferred scenario would seek to maintain the existing character of each of these areas by providing various levels of access in each zone. So focusing most of the access opportunities in the Mount Tam area, continuing to provide access in the Pine Mountain area, and then preserving that watershed protection area. The preferred scenario would also decrease the density of roads and trails throughout the watershed through that restoration and decommissioning, and that would reduce the density in the Mount Tam area and the watershed protection area and maintain about the current density in the Pine Mountain area. Next slide, please. So in summary, we're looking at 3 different planning areas within the watershed that would provide those various levels of access. With the watershed protection area with no new access, the Mount Tam area continuing to support the highest level of access, and then the Pine Mountain area with a lower level of access, and then including restoration throughout all 3 of these areas. So we'll pause here if there's any board questions or discussion on the planning areas, and then we can get into the specifics of the preferred scenario.
Great, thank you. And we'll start to my right.
All good. Thanks.
Hey, I am super excited to see that the idea of having a protected area be put into this plan, the idea of zones as part of our land management. This is a thoughtful move. Teary proud of our move to protect the environment. And I'm hopeful, I'd like to understand a little bit more about some of the pushback on both sides, I guess, for the protection area. And how we might consider whether there are expansion opportunities in the future. But as a start, I am thrilled that we're thinking about truly preserving some of our special place that has not been as impacted as the rest. So thank you for having that.
Great. Director Russell.
I'm cool, thanks.
Great. Director Mayer.
Very, very appreciative of how much thought and effort is gone into this. Are you going to talk at some point in this presentation on, and if not, can you do now, discuss a little bit how moving these fire roads to trail status, how it's restorative, the benefits that come from that, and how that it lends itself to a restorative consequences.
Yeah, of course. So the district's been doing road to trail conversion for quite some time under our 2005 management plan. And the general concept is our fire roads are about 14 feet wide. And if you bring that down to a 4-foot trail, then you're having about that 10-foot area on either side that you can restore to native habitat. And we see this happening on the watershed kind of passively when we don't maintain certain fire roads. And that is something we've done in the past. Also, we've actively taken on more aggressive approaches to restore the contours of those fire roads and restore a trail system. One area that you can think of is the Azalea Hill Liberty Gulch. That was a fire road at one point, and now we've converted that down into a trail. You want to add anything?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I mean, that's, in that 14-foot roadbed, you do have the opportunity to, create a trail that has those kind of standard BMPs and erosion control features. So, in addition to restoring the habitat along the edges, you can also create a more sustainable trail that has less erosion, less runoff.
Great. Very helpful. Thank you.
Continue on the fire road component real quickly. When we start looking at a lot of the trail conversion, road to trail, there's a concern that those wouldn't allow for emergency access, things like that. Can you touch on that as we evaluate this process?
Yeah, the major fire road conversion that you'll see in the access map is Rocky Ridge. It's a bit redundant to Lagunitas Rock Springs Road, which is one of the reasons that it was identified. It's also steep and through some sensitive habitat, and we're maintaining it as a large feature right now. There's really an opportunity there to downscale that footprint from a recreational and from an access standpoint while not losing that emergency response access. The other area is Pine Mountain Loop is the fire road that we've identified. We had a major slide there a couple of years ago. To restore that access to what we would really need for emergency response would be a pretty significant endeavor. So downscaling it at this point makes sense, but there's still emergency access on both sides of that road.
Great, thank you for that. One follow-up question, in terms of the watershed protection area, it's exciting to see, especially with a continuity north-south along that area. How is it defined on its northern and southern boundary?
Yeah, so we tried to, preserve it as an area where there would be no roads and trails within it. So that was really the key point of it, and so we bordered it by the existing facilities, right? So you have one county road, Bolinas-Fairfax Road, on the south side. Then you have Bolinas Fire Road on the east-west side, and then on the north side, you've got our Shafter Grade Road that goes down to Leo T. Cronin.
Gotcha, and if I'm not mistaken, Shafter is not a fun road to traverse, whether you're on foot, horse, or bike going up pretty steep.
Yeah, a steep road. We've heard some comments that maybe there could be an adjustment there in trying to provide some trail access.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I think as we look and not understanding completely the use for emergency access for that current facility, especially so close to the dam and Leo T. Cronin, but is there an opportunity to develop an alternative path that's a little bit more enjoyable for people to get the same access? Or would the current footprint of the watershed protection area preclude that? Or if we move it south just a tad to see if we can get a better alignment going up to that ridge?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to look at if there's an adjustment there, if the board would like.
Okay, yeah, I mean, not a very big swath, just a small little sliver to achieve what I think would be potentially a future benefit while still maintaining the entire, most of the size of that would be great. Any other board questions at this point? Okay, we continue.
Okay, so next we'll go through the restoration approach in the preferred scenario. And to identify the restoration opportunities, we conducted analysis of all of the non-system routes throughout the watershed to evaluate the ecological and the watershed or water quality benefits that could be achieved through restoring those. So this analysis overlaid a lot of different data and weighted that data, considering factors like the location of sensitive wildlife habitat, the location of serpentine soils, non-system routes that crossed waterways or were close to water bodies or other waterways. We also looked at the slope of the terrain and the grade of the trails and the overall trail sustainability and erosion potential. And we aggregated all of that to identify the most sensitive or highest priority non-system routes for restoration. We then took those high priority restoration opportunities and paired them with access changes to identify high priority restoration near trails where there's an access change proposed, with the rationale being that we wanted to see environmental benefits near where there'd be access changes, and also as a way to prevent additional use of those non-system routes. If a trail changes to allow additional access, we don't want more people going down those non-system routes. So this map shows the conservation and recreation proposals. It includes that watershed protection area that we'd mentioned, and this also includes a little over 60 miles of road and trail restoration. So that includes full restoration of 47.5 miles of non-system routes, and those specific routes proposed for restoration are shown by the brown lines on this map. You'll also see those two gray areas, those areas with a high density of non-system routes and sensitive resources. So we've identified specific restoration targets within each of those areas, but wanted to retain a little bit of flexibility in selecting exactly which route gets restored. And then the preferred scenario also includes 12.6 miles of restoration through the road to trail conversions. Again, as we mentioned, where the existing road beds are restored, but you still maintain access through a narrower trail corridor. And those are shown in the blue lines on this map, the road to trail conversions. Next slide. So, some of the considerations that guided that proposed restoration approach include prioritizing that high level of restoration. This was, generally supported by community members at the last workshop, and really is a way to ensure that the road and trail management plan has that water quality and ecosystem benefit. It prioritizes the non-system route restoration based on those ecological and water quality criteria, and then it pairs that restoration with the access improvements, so we're restoring trails near access changes. And then it also includes the approach we've discussed about using road to trail conversions as a tool to restore habitat while maintaining access. So we'll pause again here for any board questions or discussion, and then move on to the next.
Again, I think it's all clear at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, what you've done here is you've responded to community input about the impact of our social trails. This has been something that has been decades long of a nuisance for us, an impact on the environment that has been negative, and especially some of my friends at the Marin Conservation League, this was top of priority for them. I think what you've done is proven that this is not just a recreation plan and about bikes. This is about really protecting our land and being thoughtful about land management. So I really do appreciate this. This was beyond my expectations. I think it will be important as we get towards finalizing this to understand the impact on hikers. There are definitely some trails in there that I've been on that are special and that people have been on for decades as well. So, you know, when we get into the details here, I'm sure this will shift. But what a massive change and positive impact on protecting our land. So thank you for including this and not just have this be about bikes.
Director Russell.
I'm a little confused. When you use the word restoration, you mean elimination?
That's correct, yeah.
Turning it back to nature?
Yeah, exactly. Closing the trail, revegetating, potentially recontouring the soil, and getting it back to a natural state.
And do you talk about costs somewhere along here?
We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, so the intention here is to get a preferred planning scenario that has all the miles of improvements, restoration, and then come up with kind of our understanding of outreach and stewardship activities that the board would like to see, and then come up with a work plan. And then, you know, dissect that work plan in the different ways that we could go about implementing it.
I think it would be a good idea to come up with some kind of a cost per mile, just to have something to reference. I mean,
Yeah.
60 miles is a lot of distance.
Yeah.
Great. Director Mayer.
No questions right now. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting, I think, when we look at this part of the process, this might be one of the biggest benefits to the ecological component of our mountain, you know, hard stop. We've got so much recreational use for a long time that didn't have the science to understand the impact, and now we have the science to understand the impact, and now we have the ability to make responsible, mature changes, so it's very exciting.
I have one more question. How do you envision keeping the casual trails from being reestablished?
Yeah, great question. So Azalea Hill is a project that we recently adopted, and we've been closing about 4.2 miles of social trail in that area. And there's different methods that we've used. We've used kind of split rail fencing to kind of guide folks through the area and onto the main trail. In some of these areas, there's really an opportunity as part of our forest restoration work to make the trails very unusable. You know, putting large logs down on the trails and that kind of thing. And so there are nature-based ways that we can kind of manage use and access.
Okay. Well, next we'll discuss the access changes in the preferred scenario. Go to the next slide. So the preferred scenario would include access changes along about 42.3 miles of road and trail that are shown on this map. So the dashed brown line on this map is the one new proposed hiking only trail. The dashed green lines are proposed hiking and biking trails. And then the dashed blue lines are proposed multi-use trails that would allow hiking, biking, and equestrians on the same trail. So these changes would affect about 11 miles of the existing system trails, where existing trails would be redesignated to allow additional uses. And then this would also include about 12.6 miles of the road to trail conversions, where the type of use on those trails wouldn't necessarily change, but it would be, again, shrunk from a road into a trail. The access changes would also add about 18.7 miles of trails as part of the formal system, with most of these being existing non-system routes that are out there in the watershed, but where they're proposed to be rerouted or upgraded to be made more sustainable and then adopted as part of the formal system, so they're maintained. It does include about 6.5 miles of new trail construction, and adding the miles of trail to the system It's intended to do a couple of things. I mean, it provides these important connections and experiences that people are looking for. But to get to the earlier question about preventing the proliferation of non-system routes, that's another strategy to do it. When we see these non-system routes getting built over and over again, like we have in the watershed, it's a sign that there's something that's not provided in the trail system that people are seeking, a connection from one trail to another, or a specific location, or a specific experience. And so, the idea with adding these trails to the system is to provide what people are already looking for in a sustainable, maintainable trail to discourage that ongoing proliferation of new non-system routes.
Can add a couple things about the trail access. Can you see the cursor? You can, right, folks?
Yep,
Right there.
yes.
So this area, the Watershed Deer Park entrance, would be one of the 6.6 miles of new trail. We want to call this one out a little bit because there is a school there currently where our access goes through that schoolyard for folks to come into the watershed. And so there's been this idea out there for a long time, if we can put a new trail on a social trail that's on the other side of the creek to get the public out of that school. And this would provide an alternative access that would allow for bikes and hikers to come into the watershed, and then we'd connect folks over the creek and back to the trail network where folks are hiking. And then an opportunity for cyclists to make it up to kind of the Five Corners area. So that would be a new connection. We just want to call that one out. The other new one is up here on Ridgecrest Boulevard. So there's an old trail that follows Ridgecrest Boulevard, and so the thought is that to get bikes off of the road where cars are, that we could open up this alternative route at the top of Ridgecrest. And then the other new trail is out by Kent that kind of builds off of an existing fire road and connects to an old logging road.
Great. If you go to the next slide, we can look at a little more detail. This is an enlargement of the Mount Tamalpais area, showing those proposed changes. At the top of the map, you can see the Deer Park area that Sean just described. This also includes the blue lines there, kind of in the center top, as redesignating trails in the Pumpkin Ridge area to multi-use to provide that multi-use connection in one of the most popular spots in the watershed. To the left of that, you can see a proposal to improve and redesignate Sunnyside Trail as a hiking and biking trail to provide a family-friendly biking opportunity in a beautiful setting. And then, one of the most frequent comments that we got from community members who mountain bike is to provide some kind of biking connection along Northside Trail and loop connections from that area. And so the preferred scenario includes a number of changes in that area. It would redesignate Northside Trail as a hiking and biking trail, and then it would connect a series of existing roads and non-system routes to create the Three Peaks hiking and biking trail near East Peak, Middle Peak, and West Peak, and then provide a more sustainable trail connection from East Peak down to Lake Lagunitas that would replace an existing popular non-system route. And then on the other side of Northside, it would restore the existing section of the existing lagoon road that's in poor condition and replace that with a more sustainable hiking and biking trail that goes from near West Peak down to Bontempe Lake.
What does more sustainable mean?
It means designed with current standards so that it has less erosion, it's avoiding sensitive resources, requires less ongoing maintenance.
So maybe an example of that, Director Russell, is the top Arturo here currently goes through a creek, and a pretty minor reroute to go up and around that creek. And so, features like that you would just be adjusting the alignment.
Yeah, and along the lines of more sustainable trails, this also includes a proposed hiking-only Rocky Ridge Trail, and that's another place where there's an existing non-system route, but it would be decommissioned and then replaced with this more sustainably designed trail.
And the reason we brought forward that hiking trail in this proposal is that in thinking about creating Rocky Ridge as a multi-use trail, we wanted to make sure there was an opportunity for hikers to have an off-trail hiking experience that didn't have bikes, and this provides a nice connection to Stocking and Kent Trail and creates a big loop that it would be hiking only while creating a multi-use trail down Rocky Ridge.
And then I think the last one I hear you talked about were the trails parallel to Ridgecrest Boulevard. So then, those are on the bottom of the map. And, Sean mentioned those would include some new trail construction, but also some existing non-system routes that could be upgraded, improved, and linked up. And then this map shows the Pine Mountain area. Again, we have fewer proposed access changes in this area, but there are some important ones. Starting at the top of the map, you can see the grassy slope overlook. That would be a road to trail conversion, but still keeping it open to multiple uses. There's also road to trail conversions proposed to create the Pine Mountain hiking and biking trail. And then west of that, this scenario proposes to adopt a popular non-system route known as the New Paradigm Trail as a hiking biking trail and make improvements in that to improve the sustainability. And then, Shawn had talked about the trail near the east shore of Kent Lake. And again, this would provide that longer loop connection that would connect to existing roads and would involve some non-system trails, but really that's the most mileage of new trail construction. The preferred scenario would be in that point. And then just wanted to point out near the bottom of the screen, you can see the Oat Hill Old V hiking and biking trail. And that would be also a combination of road to trail conversions and upgrading and adopting non-system routes. So I won't recap everything we just talked about for access considerations, but I think there are a couple of points worth considering. This proposed scenario includes a little over 5 miles of multiple use trails that would be open to hiking, biking, and equestrians. And so these might be trails that require a little bit more special consideration in terms of developing the right design standards to make sure they accommodate all the uses. And these might be places where we want to consider some of those management approaches. We did hear concerns from equestrians about potential conflicts with bikes on the same trail. And so the access changes were designed to minimize changes to existing equestrian trails. Right now, there are about 17 miles of hiking and equestrian trails in the watershed, and 12 miles of those would have no changes. Some of the others would include multiple uses. And then these access changes, again, provide those important connections between existing roads and trails, both as that way to improve the experience for visitor and as a way to discourage the creation of new non-system routes by providing more sustainable options for people to get where they want to go. But there are some additional trail connection opportunities that could be considered. I think the example on the screen of having a trail from Bolinas Ridge to Leo T. Cronin's come up. That's not something we're currently showing in the preferred scenario because it is within that watershed protection area. But that's something that could be considered, and there are other trail connections that could be considered. And then I think with that, we can pause for any board questions or comments.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Adam, just on the 18.7 miles of hiking, biking trails that are added to this system, you've gone over that, I think, in good detail, but I just wanted to confirm, does this include the 12.6 miles of fire road conversion?
It does not. So those are already within the system. So that would be, that 18.7 miles is primarily adopting those non-system routes.
It's non-system,
Yeah.
not the fire road to trail conversions.
That's right.
Okay, and then the amount of new trail is about, I think you said about 6.6.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 6.5, 6.6. And again, about 4 miles, a little over 4 miles of that would be that Kent Lake Trail. And then as Shawn mentioned, it'd be near the school at Deer Park, and then some of the new trail to link up those existing non-system trails along Ridgecrest Boulevard.
Okay, great, thank you.
Director Smith.
Yeah, tons of questions, but I think I'll just limit it at this point. Can you talk a little bit more about the 5 of the 17 miles of equestrian trails that we have, and how you picked those 5? Is there any research that we've done on how many horseback riders use them? Are they populated? Is it unpopulated? Yeah, anything that you can add that would be helpful. Obviously, safety is a big concern, so yeah.
Yeah, of course. So one of the areas was, there was an interest when we started talking about bike access, where do we want to focus? There was an interest in getting folks off of Sky Oaks Road, and so Pumpkin Ridge was one of the ideas that came forward. This is actually an old fire road that was converted to a trail for equestrian hiking. And when you bring Pumpkin Ridge into the conversation, you start to think about, should you connect Madrone down to Concrete Pipe Road? It kind of creates a front country loop, if you will, fairly moderate. And that is part of the equestrian network, and that 5 miles. So When we did our visitor census survey, we did counts on the watershed and direct counts, and we've been monitoring various trails. We see about 3 to 5 equestrians a month in that part of the watershed, and that's
A day?
a month,
A month?
yeah.
Okay.
And so that's, you know, that is going to go into our thinking around the management approaches that would be appropriate there. But this is kind of an interesting opportunity for multi-use, right? We have a nice road on Pumpkin Ridge to reconsider and great line of sight. We would have to go around a staircase, but that staircase has an old fire road that was adjacent that could be reopened. Madrone, we did some improvements on during the pilot because that was one of the ones we were considering. Now in this scenario, it did connect to Fish Gulch, but you saw that we are recommending that we drop that because it's pretty steep and along a creek. But there might be another opportunity to adopt a trail from Concrete Pipe Road down to Phoenix Junction. It'd be a small addition, and we're currently showing that here on this as a multi-use route.
And there's been some pushback about bikers poaching the trail that goes by the equestrian center in Fairfax. And I saw it myself. I've seen the counts that they've done. It seems dangerous. How are you planning to address that?
Yeah, and so that is one of the key pieces of this proposal is bringing in that new deer park entrance, right? So not I mentioned we were getting folks out of the school, but we're also providing a multi-use route into the watersheds from that neighborhood that would provide an alternative from, you know, poaching through that Marin Stables area.
Thank you.
I think, Matt, if I could add just one comment, as I, look at these more at greater length, the theme that starts to stand out more and more is you guys are looking for connections and creating loops with which is, I think, obvious. The benefits of that are obvious for a recreational experience, hiking or biking.
Yeah, and what maybe doesn't show up as well on this map is a lot of these green lines are connecting with fire roads. So those loops are more exact or more extensive than they may look right now because we're kind of muting that fire road layer on this map.
Director Russell.
I understand you're looking at scoping here, but have you got a feel for the time? Is this a 2 years, 10 years?
Oh, yeah, time of implementation of something
Yes.
like this? Yeah, so the interesting thing, right, 12 miles of road to trail conversion. Those roads are open to cycling now, so that becomes a conversation around what standard would the board like to see, prescribed to those road to trail conversions. Are we looking at kind of different technical features, or are we looking at a passive restoration approach? Those could come online fairly quickly with maybe limited work, depending on what we want to improve. As you start thinking about the non-system trails and bringing those in, maybe a little bit more complicated. And then also in regards to the system trails at 11 miles, that's a discussion that we will have around the standard that we want to achieve, and then that'll kind of dictate how we move forward with the implementation and the time frame for that. I think we've been scoping this thinking like 5 to 5+ years, and thinking a lot. That's how our BIFIP was written. It really gave us some targets on year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'd see if we can meet those.
Director Mayer.
I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood. So the equestrians have access to 13 miles of trails currently, and
Currently at 17, yeah.
Okay, so and then I see. I think I understand where I got 13. So there's 4 miles of trails that they would now share ostensibly with. If that's, I know we're just sussing out what we might study and take a closer look at. But the idea would be that one of the plans has 4 miles of trails that they could be asked to share. Is that
That's
right?
correct. So on this proposal, we have about 5 miles of overlap of that equestrian network.
Okay. And just to be clear, at the end of this, we're hoping to get our arms around the bounds of what we're going to analyze a little bit more, not to make a firm decision, right? There's going to be a lot more opportunity for the public to weigh in and all of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So this would be defining our largest project, and we would be scoping and analyzing this. And the real benefit of doing this, early exercise with the community is we had lots of ideas. We were able to shape those ideas and bring it into kind of a cohesive plan that makes sense, and then also focus our resources on studying and analyzing the trails that are most likely to move forward.
Great. Thank you. I don't have anything more, Matt. Thank you.
Okay. Going back to the Pine Mountain area as part of this here, looking at the new trail that hugs the west side of Pine Mountain to go there, It's hard to see from the map, it looks like it dead ends right towards Alpine. Would it then connect with a further system or current fire road area that, it wouldn't be a dead end trail, if I'm assuming?
Yeah, great. So Kent Pump Road is right here, and this is all the way to Alpine Dam. So there is a fire road that takes you all the way back here to where we have an inlet and outlet. And then there's an old trail through some of this, and then on the other side, there's an old logging road, and there'd be some new trail connecting those two.
Great. So it sounds like that area of the watershed has seen extensive, I guess, disruption for quite some time now. It's
Yeah,
not as
that's-
pristine as the western side of Kent Lake.
Yeah, that's astute. So there's a lot of old activity out here. There's hunting camps, there's old logging roads, excuse me. This is where the PG&E transmission line goes through the watershed, right across Kent Lake. This is the area that that's in. So there's currently access roads that PG&E utilizes in this zone. So yeah, it's been a heavily used part of the watershed. There's an opportunity to continue our stewardship work and improve some opportunities for access as well.
But really focus in making sure whatever is happening there is happening in the best possible way. Right. And even if we wanted to start roping that off, PG&E has access, and
Correct.
probably in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So the next slide. So we also identified a need for some trail accessibility improvements, and really as a way to provide opportunities for community members to access and connect with the watershed regardless of their ability. And so in the preferred scenario, we've identified about 4.5 miles of trails that are shown on the screen here that could be improved to provide better accessibility. These aren't proposed to be fully paved ADA compliant pathways, but instead they could retain the natural surface and be improved, kind of consistent with existing accessibility guidelines, just as a way to make these trails more accessible, maybe widen them, smooth out the tread, flatten out steep sections, and provide an opportunity at each of the major entrance points in the watershed for people to get out and experience the natural condition of the watershed regardless of their abilities. Next slide.
And just to emphasize, these are all existing trails that we just see an opportunity from the parking lots to provide out and back or a unique connection to our watershed.
And then we've talked a bit about management approaches. In the scenarios that we presented at the last community workshop, we had a wide range of management approaches. And as I mentioned, there wasn't a whole lot of support for applying a lot of specific management approaches. But we have heard concerns about potential conflicts between having different types of uses on the same trail. And so there are a few options that we can consider to address those potential conflicts between having multiple use trails with a lot of different users on them. You can widen the trail to provide more room for passing, but that involves new disturbance and construction. And some areas are constrained. So for example, the photo in the upper right corner is a narrow section of Northside Trail, where it'd be very difficult to really widen out that trail and provide a lot of room for passing. You could also separate different uses onto different trails. So for example, having biking only trails, hiking only trails, and equestrian only. But the downside is that requires many more miles of trails to provide that same level of access to everyone. So you could establish these alternating days for different uses like we've talked about. So for instance, bikes could be on a trail on even dates and hikers and equestrian on odd dates. And this is a pretty common approach. The photo in the lower right corner is a sign from a section of the Tahoe Rim Trail that allows bikes on even days. And this has also been implemented in the Bay Area by National Park Service, East Bay Regional Park District, and others. And then, the fourth approach is that you can have single direction trails for bikes, which we've talked about. And this reduces the overall bike traffic on a trail. And it also gives hikers and equestrians a way to know which direction bikes would be coming from and to look out for them.
And does the Tahoe Trail, is it enforced?
It is enforced. It's on Forest Service land, so it's enforced by Forest Service rangers. But it's also pretty well known, so people just know, through the education that's gone, people know when they're allowed to go up there on their bikes and when to go hiking if they don't want to see bikes.
And I just want to emphasize that we're thinking about this, from a core issue of safety, and that's really critical to how we're thinking about using management approaches, but also from an environmental perspective, right? If you have multiple uses going both directions, you have concerns around people having to step aside, and does that widen the trail over time, right? We heard concerns around that. So management approaches might be a way for us to think through a less environmental or more environmentally sensitive approach, less of an impact by managing the trails this way.
And so we haven't developed specific proposed management approaches for the preferred scenario, and we're seeking your input and feedback from the public. But in general, no one approach fits every trail. There are some trails that can accommodate multiple uses pretty easily, but maybe in those more constrained or narrow areas or the more popular trails, we might want to consider some of these management approaches. Again, we could consider designating single-use trails. So for example, biking-only trails. That's not in the current proposal, but something that could be considered. And again, the alternating days for different types of uses wasn't really widely supported by the community feedback, but that it could be an effective way to address many of these concerns. And then the other thing to consider is that the district can use these management approaches as part of an adaptive management framework. So you don't necessarily need to codify every specific management approach in the plan, but it can provide a toolbox of options that can be implemented and adjusted over time as needed. And then the final approach, final consideration is that we also need to think about how we educate visitors about these, how we enforce these. That could require some resources. So we can pause there if there's any board discussion or questions on the management approaches or accessible trails.
Are you looking for feedback right now specifically?
We don't need to get specific to like which trail gets what management approach, but generally if there's thoughts on like what you would like staff to be thinking about as we start looking at these trails, that would be helpful.
When we started thinking about this, I sort of went there naturally because we do see it in other places like in Tahoe. And then I heard the argument that it potentially reduces our ability to show that we can have shared access on trails without the levels of conflict or safety concerns that some of us might perceive if we go immediately to segregating trails or restricting the amount of shared access. We may not have that opportunity to determine if it actually works. We do have multi-use trails in the county, and my experience has been that there doesn't seem to be much conflict, but again, those could be because the trails are well suited for multi-use. They're wider. I'm wondering if we could, one possibility is to wait to see if problems arise and then try to use management approaches to address those problems.
Great, yeah, I guess I'm not an expert in this, but I feel like every other day or odd and even days would get confusing for our folks, and they're not used to it. Maybe there could be a trail or two that would be single use, and I would focus on that from a safety perspective. It could be a social trail that gets converted, so I'm open to that. I am curious, I have two questions. One is for the fire road conversion to become trail use, that sounds like it could have significant positive environmental impact. How many miles of fire roads are we talking about converting? And can you talk a little bit about your initial instinct and what the impact would be?
I think we've got 12.6 miles of fire road to trail conversion at this point. So if we think about an area, right, that's 12 to 14 feet wide, we're bringing that down to 4 feet. That could be the standard. It could even be 2 feet, right? So we're going to be working with you all to think through which trails are what width based on the current type of visitation that they see. Some are going to look a little bit different.
And then related, can you talk about our experience with Azalea Hill, specifically on the impact on native plants? There was a lot of controversy and feeling like it was going to be extremely destructive. How has that experiment gone? How does having a managed approach to trail use impact our ability to protect our endemic species and native habitat?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Azalea Hill is an interesting one because, right, Some of it was an old road, some of it was a fishing trail. So the fishing trail was very narrow, the road was very wide. We had rare plants and sensitive plants all through different parts of that trail network and area. So we did a lot of pre-project surveys to find an alignment that would limit kind of that overlap between those. But we did approve in the Azalea Hill as the multi-use trail for it to be what is called our Class 4 road, which is about 4 feet wide to accommodate equestrians, hikers, and UTV access. That made the impact larger because we had to go wider to achieve that. You'll remember that the board did approve an addendum to do a trail narrowing through a very sensitive part of the network, and that goes down to about 18 inches wide, and that connects to the road. So there's opportunities to avoid plants as we redesign. When we can figure out a way to share on a smaller trail, we can have a smaller input or a footprint. And as we've been doing our monitoring of rare plants since the inception of that project and implementation, we've seen those populations be stable over time.
You've seen the populations of our native plants, endemic species around Azalea Hill to be stable over time due to our management of that area.
Due to the alignment of the trail and the management of it, yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, Matt, that also makes me ask, Azalea Hill is multi-use. Does that include equestrian use, or is it
Yeah,
just
the Liberty Gulch section is multi-use.
Liberty Gulch?
That's
sorry.
equestrian, hiking and biking. And then the Azalea Hill that we're still in the process of constructing, the trail that gets over to Bolinas Ridge, or Bolinas Fairfax Road, excuse me, is hiking and equestrian.
Okay. On Liberty Gulch, are we hearing about safety concerns or conflicts? Has this been coming up?
Dawn can correct me, but I don't believe we've had any incidents out there. And we do have kind of that trail narrowing section near the lake, and then
Right.
We did also try to limit on the Liberty Gulch Road, right? We tried to limit the amount of work that happened because some of it does go through serpentine, and so we were very careful about how active we were in widening that footprint there.
But I think it's important to also note that holistically, that project got use that was not good into an area that was much better, right? And it was social trail that was going through sensitive areas that was now shuffled somewhere else. And so as part of the whole system, we see a big net benefit.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Director Russell.
You talked a lot about plants. What about critters?
Yeah. The creek crossings are our most sensitive areas, and we put bridges over all the creeks on Azalea Hill, right? And in this plan, we really, the layering that Adam went through to show what we were looking at for these trails, really tried to select trails that don't have a lot of stream crossings, or we can reroute around those stream crossings.
I remember Larry Minnike's had a lot of pictures of dead lizards.
Yeah.
And will we have any plan for the lizards?
The monitoring of wildlife is something that'll come in our monitoring and adaptive management discussion. There are areas of the watershed that are more sensitive in terms of what the newts that are around Lake Lagunitas. There could be considerations in those super sensitive zones that you do some kind of controlled use.
Do you think they were smart enough to take
a tunnel? I worked on a project on Stony Point Road in Santa Rosa for the tiger salamander where we built a tunnel. They were smart enough there, but it was because they had a breeding pond on the other side, so a pretty direct
driving
route.
force? Yeah. Well, let's hope so.
Director Mayer.
I'm really pleased with all the work and all the thoughtfulness and the efforts at restoration as well as access. I think both are really important. I also just want to say, I think we need to remember we've still got the CEQA studies. So I think, a lot of these decisions about how much things are managed may be impacted by what we find out in that process. And I think we should, stay nimble for what we do find out. That's about all I have right now. Thank you.
I think bringing the conversation back to the management approach here, I agree with Director Smith. I think that when we start looking at alternative days and things like that, we're going to run into some confusion that could be potentially problems. And I don't know if we need to solve for a problem that's not there yet, but at the same time, still keep the solution set in our back pocket. So would these need to be considered as part of the environmental review that we would have the ability to do this, or is that not part of it?
We can carry those forward as part of the environmental review in a couple of ways. There might be some trails that are just uniquely narrow that we want to really consider them so that we don't have to widen them, right? And we'll bring forward those kind of considerations through that process. And then in other ways, we might use them more as a tool in the toolkit long-term and just have them available to utilize on any trail if needed.
Great, thank
So
you.
maybe a combination is what I'm trying to say.
Perfect. Any other questions? Great, we're good.
Great, can we go to the next slide? So the last piece of the preferred scenario we want to talk about is the approach for trail classifications and standards. So the existing road and trail classifications from the 2005 plan are shown on the left side of the screen here. And these classifications have generally worked, but they don't really account for, well, they don't account at all for trails that would allow bicycle access. And then they don't really closely align with the standards that are needed to support each type of use on the trails. And so we've included some preliminary proposed classifications on the right side of the screen. These are pretty early. We want to make sure that we confirm the access changes first so we know, which types of trails we need to incorporate. But our current thinking is that we'd retain the road classifications and then update the trail classifications to more closely align with the types of use that would be allowed on each trail. So that could include a new classification for multi-use double track trails. That would be the wider multi-use trails, as well as a classification for single track multi-use trails, or those narrow ones allowing multiple uses. And then separate classifications for hiking and equestrian trails, hiking and biking trails, and hiking only trails. So again, we want to make sure we confirm the type of trails that we're looking at in the access scenarios, and then we can finalize these classifications. And then the next step would be to develop the standards where they're needed. Yeah, so that'll pass it back to Sean.
Great. Thanks for bearing with us through all that. I know that was a lot of information. So next steps for this is we're going to work with you this evening and try to confirm the planning scenario. We're really hopeful that the elements broken out individually gave clarity around what we're talking about and thinking about. We'll continue our field surveys and biological review in the background. We're going to confirm the classification and develop our standards from here. So if our classification system that Adam just went over is good, then we'll start developing standards for those. To Director Russell's point, the next part of this process is to start developing the work plan and what that might look like for implementing this and thinking about the sequencing of those improvements, and then develop recommendations for community stewardship. We've talked a lot about kind of maps and wayfinding and educational tools that we can provide on the watershed and what that might look like, and then starting to draft our TMP update, excuse me. In terms of timeline, we're going to continue to engage the community as we move through this process. The next step for that would be our notice of preparation or environmental scoping period, which we're targeting August, September for. If we're able to move forward, we'd be focused on our environmental issues for the CEQA analysis as that step. We'd have a community meeting to provide input and opportunities for people to provide written comments, and then we'd move to our public review of the draft RTMP in the fall of 2026, and then continue on from there. So that's our presentation for the evening. If you have any final comments or direction for us, we'd love to hear it.
Sean, Adam, Carly, thank you very much for all of this work going into it. And with the board here, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to board questions for the staff and the consultant, and then we can go ahead and take public comment and then bring it back to the board for comment and direction if that works for everybody. Great. Go ahead and start with questions.
I don't know about specific questions. We've been over, I think, a lot of the detail. As my colleagues have mentioned, this is so much more than a plan for providing access to bicycles. It really is a wholesale effort to look at the management of our watershed and improve the management of our watershed. It's interesting to note that we're doing this update, it seems like, of the RTMP now in 20-year cycles. So it is due. And I think as Director Sampson noted, a lot of this effort is in response to the pushback we received for the earlier efforts to pilot bicycles on trails. And, in some ways, I think there were benefits of that pushback that we're seeing now. It really has forced a more comprehensive evaluation of restoration and management needs across the entire watershed. And there's, I believe, elements that all of us will find compelling. For example, the watershed protection area, the conversion of fire roads to trails. these are things that should go forward. Now, some of you in the audience here today have called me and asked, well, these are great changes and we should take them forward, the restoration work, the watershed protection area, but why do we have to also emphasize now bicycles on trails? Why do we need to still move forward with that component? And I just want to speak to that for a minute. As I've told you when you've asked me, I really believe strongly that when people have legitimate access, they tend to take ownership. They self-police, they call out bad behavior among their own, and they show up as volunteers on maintenance crews, as partners in caring for this place rather than trespassers on it. A community that feels welcome on the watershed becomes a community that helps us protect it. And I really believe by taking these steps, we're also going to be supporting that behavior. So no further questions at this point, Sean. Thanks.
Director Smith.
Yeah, I'll second Larry's questions regarding getting some sense of the cost and timeline. Those are two important items. I know we're early, but let's start working on that and presenting that, please.
Well, at least up on this end of the table, I'm the only person that was here in 2005. And I think that the change that I feel is coming from you, Sean. It's your vision that's changing. This thing was done in 2005, as I recall, pretty slam dunk, move forward. And following the previous elements of this. So I thank you for that vision. It's a change in view that's well due here. Do you envision most of these trails are one way or two ways?
I think as we start doing the environmental review, we'll come with recommendations for them as we start understanding what sensitivity each
So it
one
could be a
has.
mix.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Director Mayer.
Let's see. There's a couple things I want to say. I guess I also second Director Russell's inquiries about cost and timing, and but I think that is further down the road. I think that what I think from a Gestalt perspective, a macro perspective, is that we're so lucky to live where we live. And I love, one of my favorite things about being in Marin is that people are so engaged with nature. And I think it's really important to remember that all of the wildlife and the plants and the native grasses and everything would really do best, other than when we go out there and hack at non-native weeds, essentially, if we weren't on the watershed at all. And since we're
Okay, we'll move on until she comes back. I'm looking at some of the questions. One of the components that I don't think got enough highlight during the presentation, which I think is absolutely amazing and beneficial for the community, is the ADA access. I think having that is just such a right move. And I really appreciate that being considered as part of this project. And so looking at that, if we could look to support that with handicap signs or parking stalls over those areas, and even what it would take to make those pathways as accessible as possible, because just the ability for someone to enjoy a salmon run along Leo T. Cronin, that's a really, really interesting opportunity. So kudos off to that.
I'll second that. Sorry, I meant to mention that. Well done. That's so important. It's been on our list for a long time. So thank you for bringing that up.
Great. Can we go back to some of the trails you had talked about earlier that received mixed feedback from the group? And I think I want to specifically talk about Sunnyside itself, because it sounded like that was, if we could get a little bit more in-depth, granular understanding of where the public was on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that was, during the community workshop, we had opportunity for people to, look at the scenarios and rank, the trails that they most supported, the ones they least supported. And Sunnyside probably had the most dots out of all. It had a lot of support and a lot of opposition. I think some of the concerns were that it's family friendly now. People didn't want to see bikes going on there, but that was also part of the support, is that people wanted a place where they could, get their kids on bikes who are just learning and be in a beautiful setting and have a fairly flat, fairly wide trail.
Yeah, so there's a family-friendly element that was important. Initially, and maybe when we had fewer miles in our analysis as part of the pilot, we were thinking about that connection because it connects to Pumpkin Ridge. But that was when we were looking at 6 miles. As you start looking at, a larger portfolio of trails, it becomes, I think, less important from an access perspective for bikes, as some of the other trails look more appealing. But it does have that uniqueness in that it would get bikes off of a road. But it has challenges. It's close to the reservoir's edge. The trail's in good condition with great line of sight, but there are some areas that are eroding and it's narrowing, so those would be kind of challenging areas for us to build on. And being adjacent to the reservoir, your ability to do the widening work for maybe a full multi-use is a little more challenging.
You can only go one way, widening it, right?
Yeah.
So it would take some restoration work, not as in opposed to decommissioning, but actually
Yeah.
improvements to do that.
I think so. I think it'd be a fair amount of restoration to get it to the state that we'd really like to see it in for multi-use, or you have to bring forward like a management, or you might consider a management approach like directional or something like that.
Understood, okay. So 50-50 split roughly?
Yeah.
Okay, understood. And we did touch too in depth, and I know it's probably not the exact venue to do it, but in terms of advocacy, communication, visitor outreach to understand any potential changes in signage and things like that, that's going to be associated with that. Because one of the things I think that's been a real big partnership for our organization and then stakeholders is the Slow and Say Hello campaign. Yeah. And so how can we continue to incorporate efforts like that we know are working, that we know have positive outcomes into this plan? Because it doesn't make sense to start doing something like that. Yeah. So incorporating that in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the areas we've been focused on is re-envisioning the Leo T. Cronin entrance as kind of a small project that we're taking on right now to reevaluate kind of the signage that we have on the watershed and the kiosk design, and specifically the watershed maps that show kind of the type of access on which trails and why. So those components will all be things that we bring forward in the updated plan.
Great. Director Mayer, welcome back.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see me and hear me okay?
We got you.
All right. I'm on my phone now. Hopefully this will work okay. Anyway, as I was getting on my soapbox, I was just saying that I think, realizing that not human involvement is always going to be dicey. And we've made this decision to balance preserving the watershed and allowing for human involvement, because we all have such a great passion for this place we live. And so, and just as we had this conflict between hikers and equestrians not so long ago, and the equestrians really wanted access and wanted to share, and that resulted in a pretty good state of affairs. And I know this will be different. I know that bikes want to have access in ways that apparently the equestrians are not on the trails as much as I think we suspected they would be. But the other thing to remember is that bikers are already on these trails and they're doing it illegally. And I think that it is really important. There's going to be increased accountability. I think there's going to be a lot less tolerance for that if they actually have access to certain trails and don't feel like they have to sort of take the law into their own hands and give themselves access. So I think a lot of really positive things come out of it. And I think it is just, there is so much energy put into this conflict between hikers and bikers. And I'm really ready to see that all that energy be put towards more productive things like maintaining this beautiful area where we live. So I'm really pleased at how this is this plan is really a 360-degree view of things. And And thank you so much to our watershed staff for their hard work on this.
Great. Just one last question before we move to public comment. We talked about costing and timelines as part of that. I'd like to see, and it's going to be hard to quantify a little bit, but the opportunity to volunteer or stakeholder groups that would like to volunteer their time or their resources to expedite some of the potential work, whatever it is, however that best supports your staff, would be an interesting component too, because we hear a lot about we're ready or we want to be involved. All right, let's give the opportunity to do so. All right.
Matt, I
Please.
remembered a few more points. Couple of trail questions. Sean, I was surprised that the concrete pipe road conversion to trail is not going forward. That seems like a pretty obvious one.
Yeah, so right from that intersection out to the dead end of Concrete Pipe Road is what we were talking about, and converting it to a multi-use trail.
Yeah.
There was a little pushback from the equestrian community thinking that going down to a narrow trail would be an impact on them. So that's why we pulled it out and just said, okay, well, we have to kind of manage our portfolio of projects that we're going to implement, and we can maintain it as an existing road as it is. It's in a good state, and it provides the type of experience that many are looking for. And it would, in its current form, connect to that Madrone
Right.
connection if that was brought into the system, as well as maybe that new trail that brings you down to the junction. So it has utility in its current form that we can work with.
Okay. Now, we also received in written comments today one request to manage bike access on the backside of Lake Lagunitas, particularly during weekends when that is heavily trafficked by pedestrians and often little kids. That really resonated with me. I think it's not a good place to be on a bicycle during weekends. So I'm wondering, if we could include some evaluation of a management plan for the backside of Lake Lagunitas, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is one of our few opportunities for folks, on young kids to have a bike trail experience. But as you're starting to look at other trails that you might bring into the network, I think that expands it, and you could definitely, prescribe one of those management approaches, and it could be something like directional or, no bikes on a weekend,
Weekends,
right?
right.
You could make a full-scale change there.
Right.
Yeah.
And just, on costing, I assume that conversion of fire roads to trails will also reduce our longer-term maintenance costs for those roads.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We didn't kind of scope that out in terms of what the cost of a mile of maintaining a fire road is versus a mile of trail, but we can kind of workshop that for you. But yes, Rocky Ridge is a great example of a road that's very difficult to maintain as a accessible fire road due to the kind of nature of the soils there and the steepness of it. And so trying to maintain it in that width without kind of those drainage features that we'd like to see on it is difficult and expensive. And so it would be lowering our overall costs for maintaining our fire road network by converting a few of these. And the Pine Mountains loop that I mentioned, we had a large slide there. If we were to try to really preserve and bring that back into the system in the way it was before, that could be a large cost to the district. And so bringing it down to a multi-use path will help manage that.
Yeah, something hard to appreciate, but there may be financial benefits to this plan as well.
Great.
Matt, can I say one more thing too?
Please.
One thing that Ranjit's point reminded me that I wanted to say earlier is, I grew up here. I went to high school here, and in fact, was in high school when we founded like the first mountain biking club, I think, ever. And now my high school friends have teens of their own. And those teens call me up and they want to know what's going on with with access to the mountain. And for better or for worse, most of those teens aren't hikers, they aren't equestrians. And I am so happy that those are the questions I'm getting, that is how a lot of our teens in this town want to spend their time on the mountain. Engaging in such a wholesome activity. I'm sure not everything they do maybe is that wholesome, but I think I want to do everything I can to encourage the youth that are growing up in Marin to really learn an appreciation for what we have here. So I just wanted to add that point as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Without any further board questions, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment at this time. Terry, how many members of the public do we have that would like to speak?
25.
Great. With that, we'll go ahead, because the number will reduce the minute from 3 just down to 2 minutes, so just 1 minute short, out of respect. And then I'd also like to ask if there's any young kids still here or any parents with kids, if they'd like to go first, if they intend on speaking, you're welcome to go ahead and come to the microphone first. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and run. Thank you, Terry.
Okay, so if I'm going to call 3 names at a time, so if you hear it, please step up to the mic. George Foreman, or Ken Corin, and Lynn Lozier.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you also for giving the public greater access to the watershed than EBMUD gives to its lands or SFPUD gives to its lands. EBMUD, you even need a permit to set foot on the watershed. I've submitted a fairly lengthy set of comments already. I'll try and be uncharacteristically brief. My impression of the workshops that I attended was that they're structured so as to be heavily weighted in favor of increasing bicycle access. There weren't enough stickers to indicate one's disapproval of certain of the aspects of the plan. And significantly, there was no option for lower access and higher level of restoration. It was sort of a given that there was going to be some access. Second, in considering the question of equitable access for bikes, you got to consider both the resource cost, the resource impacts, the cost, the disparate impacts of those impacts on other users, as well as the resource and the costs. If safety isn't an issue, there's no justification for establishing a system of alternative days of use. If safety is an issue, then which would reduce hiker and equestrian access by 50%. If safety is an issue, then the board shouldn't be inviting an expansion of a hazardous activity on the watershed by unlimited numbers of bicyclists. By the way, how many times has the watershed tried to close the new Paradigm Trail? The notion that if cyclists are allowed legal access, they won't continue illegal access is contradicted by decades of empirical experience. Mountain bikes are already allowed on 100 miles of district fire roads and also many miles of fire roads, trails in China Camp.
Thank you,
Am I
sir.
done?
Next speaker.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay. These are the only places where people on foot of all ages, particularly Marin's aging population, of which I am one, can experience a tranquil, low-intensity movement, able to stop when we want, look where we want, without having to worry that at any second they might have to jump out of the way of one or a whole stream of mechanized high-intensity recreationists. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Corin, then Lynn Lozier, please.
I've looked into your backgrounds and I'm impressed, but I can't believe what I'm hearing tonight. We should allow illegal use by making it legal. We have greenwashing going on. What these people did was fantastic with regard to the restoration. There's no need to tie it to bring in a dangerous negative access, mountain biking. I'm a mountain biker. These days, when you're talking about a bike, you are talking about a motorized vehicle. The Marin Trail Stewards, on their website, they say land management is about choices. It is. They say choices on how to balance the needs of the natural environment with the various desires and goals of user groups. As with any public holding or service, Marin's land managers should make choices representative of their constituents. That's a false premise. This is not about popularity, unless you're worried about re-election. And with all due respect, that's not your job. You are this is a quality board. You know your job. It's about providing clean water. It's about maintaining and improving the natural conditions of the mountain. It's about public access that is safe for the users. That's not what I'm hearing on the second half of the greenwashing. The California legislature has expressly defined hazardous recreational activity. It means recreational activity conducted on property of a public entity that creates a substantial, as distinguished from minor, trivial, or insignificant risk of injury to a participant or a spectator. They didn't stop there. They went on. They specifically defined mountain biking as a hazardous recreational activity unless the mountain biking takes place on paved roads, pathways, or sidewalks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
After Ms. Lozier is Josh Josephson, Larry Minikis, and John Boshin.
Hi. First, I want to thank the board for your service. This is a really, really important thing to be doing, and it takes a great deal of mindfulness and commitment, and I'm always so impressed to listen to you, so thank you for that. You know, they barely pay you to come here, so I really appreciate that. A little bit of history. I grew up in Marin. I hike twice a week in the Watershed. I am a conservation professional. I had a career with the Nature Conservancy, still do, and I've managed natural areas and education programs, and I know this is really, really challenging. I also know that if we don't bring people along, that we will have places that have the kind of resources that I actually know about and highly value that nobody else cares about. So I appreciate the compromises and the integration that's necessary in this. I really appreciate it. A couple of specific comments. I've personally found the workshop really difficult because it was so comprehensive and people were expected to make choices like, it was like speed dating. So I'm glad you got some useful information out of it, but it was very frustrating to me. The site visits, whole different story, excellent. The goal of no net environmental loss of environmental benefit, which is a laudable thing to propose, requires that you also look at what increased use means to degrading existing trail conditions. You don't have baselines for those things. You don't have a way of knowing if you bring more bikes into a place, what you're going to get. So I think that's a hole in the rationale behind that. I wanted to highlight that. I too am very concerned about safety. I've been hiking here all my life. I'm 74. When a bike comes flying by me without knowing even that it's there often on roads, it's terrifying. And enforcement has to be built into this model. And I hope you will set the plan. Is that my 2-minute warning?
Yeah.
2 minutes is
Yeah.
up.
You can, please finish your sentence.
Thank you. I want to see it, have the plan to have enforcement in it in a way that is documentable, and I actively encourage the giving of citations, and I propose there for $1. Just to establish a cultural norm that can be enforced and communicated. It doesn't feel punitive, but is clear.
Great, thank you.
Speed traps. I recommend speed traps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh Josephson, then Larry Minikis, please.
Hi, my name is Josh Josephson. I'm a lifelong resident of Marin County. I've been recreating in the Watershed for 55 years, primarily on my bicycle. I was a member of that founding club that the mayor mentioned, Redwood High School, 1978, I think. I did attend the last workshop. I thought it was very good. Thank you for all the effort. I thought it was very comprehensive, well laid out. People I was there with all enjoyed it very much. We've seen an explosion of use in our watershed in the last 10 years. Having used the watershed for so long, I've seen a lot of changes. The last 10 years have seen an incredible increase in user numbers. I think that your progressive viewpoint on management is appropriate, and that we're going to have to, while I recreate throughout North America, primarily in wilderness. There's a lot of changes happening here. We're going to have to respond to them. I think that you guys are doing a great job. I think that Ascent is doing a comprehensive job on looking forward as to how this thing's going to have to work. People are going to have to make compromises and get along in the watershed. There's just too many people using it. And I would just applaud the board for seeing it that way and looking forward, because I think it's really necessary. That's about it. Thank you.
Well, good evening, directors and staff. We appreciate the tremendous amount of time and effort that staff and community members have invested into this RTMP process. While we support the process, the chief concern is that attention and funding are shifting toward a handful of new access opportunities, while the broader road and trail system may continue to fall behind as it has historically. A not insignificant number of the watershed's authorized roads and trails are experiencing erosion, drainage failures, widening, rutting, and other resource impacts that needed attention as a result of poor historic design and years of deferred maintenance and chronic underinvestment. For that reason, the final RTMP should include a clear maintenance strategy, dedicated funding commitments, and measurable performance metrics so the board and public can track progress in improving trail sustainability across the entire system over time. The RTMP should also incorporate seasonal trail protection measures, including temporary wet weather multi-use trail closures when conditions warrant, to prevent avoidable damage and protect long-term sustainability of the trail system. Equally important, any expansion of access should be accompanied by a strong commitment from the entire community toward improving compliance. More access must also come with more responsibility. That means that all user groups stay on designated trails, respect trail closures, cease the practices of unauthorized trail use and invasive night riding, and treating other visitors with courtesy and respect. All user groups must work together under the same set of rules to help protect and sustain the resources that we all love and value. We have an opportunity here to demonstrate leadership in recreation management, habitat protection, maintenance, education, and mutual respect as complementary goals. If we get this right, Marin now has an opportunity to serve as a model for how diverse user groups can successfully share and care for our sensitive public lands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Boshin, Bob Middlestead, and Jeffrey Bolt.
Well, I want to thank you guys too for all the careful planning, hard work you've put into this, and you continue to do so. My name is John Boshin. I live in San Rafael. I've been on the mountain biking for about, close to 40 years. Been coming to these meetings close to 40 years too. And I have one comment of a very personal, selfish nature. I'm just hoping that I'll be able to ride Northside legally before I die of natural causes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Middlestead. First of all, I want to say I agree completely with the opening comments that the chair made and Director Kush. Mount Tam should bring us together, not divide us. The good news is I've been up on the mountain for 50 years, jogging, hiking, mountain biking, e-biking, and fortunately, we have a culture of cooperation and getting along when we're up on the mountain. What we see on the mountain is quite different sometimes from what we hear in a room like this. The sky is not falling. There have been threats that the sky would fall for the last 40, 50 years, and the sky's still up there. I think there actually is a spirit of cooperation. When I was at the last workshop, I was next to Larry, and Larry was taking green stickers and putting them on some of these proposals. I was expecting, like other people, maybe they just say no, 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 no. But I think people want to do what's right. I also congratulate the staff for the thoughtful, comprehensive, and very complete study that they've made. Only other comment I would make is I think when they do the CEQA review, they ought to trust their judgment and come up with what is right, even if most people didn't vote for it. You know, we've had about 100 people who have voted here or there for this or that. I think that's entitled to some weight. But I think even more important is for the staff who have really devoted themselves to this to apply their judgment along with the board and come up with what's right for everybody. One last word. There will always be people who only want to have their type of visitors up on TAM. Fortunately, we're more inclusive than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Bolt, Renee Voss, and last name Sangali. Jeffrey Bolt. Okay, Renee Voss.
I run a land trust, and my focus is on conservation of wildlife habitat. And I want to applaud the staff for their improved process here from last time. The restoration focus is really encouraging, and I see a lot of benefits to see this process be about, improving the watershed, which is basically the main function of the water district. I want to thank you personally for taking, for example, the Tucker Trail off, which is a magical place. I've seen myself seen 2 spotted owls on there at separate occasions, and I talked to hikers that've seen mountain lions up there. It's amazing. Also the Pilot Knob Trail. On the focus of restoration and intact watershed, I'm glad to hear that the directors are interested in protecting a large watershed area, like the protected area on the west side of Kent Lake. However, that's not the whole watershed. There's almost as much area that should be protected on the east side. And that, it doesn't make any sense to me why there would be a trail proposed along the east side that would be counter to a watershed protection area. A brand new trail, the public doesn't have access to that area. We don't really know what's there. I've heard this, I just heard for the first time that there's old hunt camps and an old forest logging road, but there is no way for us to understand what's there because, right now it serves as amazing wildlife habitat. It's one of the most remote places in the entire, county of Marin. So keep that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last name Sangali? No, I don't want to speak. Okay, you don't want to speak. Thank you. Bill Albright, Tyler Collier, and Dan Cressman.
Hi, I'm Bill Abright, a longtime resident, 45 years plus mountain biker, now an e-biker. Thank you for all the consideration of inclusion into the use of the watershed that you've done. I like very much the idea of the conversion of some fire roads into trails. One of the things about mountain biking on a fire road is that it's like riding on ball bearings, and yet it's some of the only areas that we can ride legally is on the fire roads. And some fire roads are clearly not used as fire roads anymore. They're not being accessed. Rocky Ridge, for example, would be very difficult to drive a fire truck on. It's in fact very difficult to ride a mountain bike on. There are some hazardous areas, and I would certainly appreciate the conversion of Rocky Ridge with some better water management plan so there is less erosion. It's a safer place to ride. I am concerned about the idea of Sunnyside Trail becoming access to mountain bikes. I've walked that area, I've fished it, I spent a lot of time with my kids up there. Although there is line of sight, I don't think it's the best trail to provide access to. I think what we really need are access farther out and loops, such as Northside Trail, being modified slightly so that it's safer for mountain bikes to create a loop from Eldridge Grade over to Rock Springs. Upper Eldridge has become fairly treacherous as a fire road on mountain bikes, and I would support conversion of fire roads into trails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler Collier, Dan Cressman, and Walter. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, directors. Thanks so much for putting this on today, and really appreciate all the hard work that staff's done. Most of my points I think have been sort of said by Director Cush and Sampson. I think sort of having more access to the outdoors by more people just allows people to care about the environment, care about our watershed, where our water comes from. And, I think just, being able to sort of get out there, however you choose is really important. I have a young daughter, and I would love to share it with her. I primarily mountain bike, but I also hike all the time. So, I think just allowing her to have choices is also on my mind, and it's important to me. So, one thing that I really like is the conversions of roads to trails. As other commenters have said, the fire roads are really the places where you can get, too high speed, and those are sort of the more dangerous areas. And being able to control the speed with a purpose-built trail is a great way of doing that. So really appreciate that being included, as well as getting bikes off the road where possible. So thanks so much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dan Cressman. I'm a 40-year resident of Mill Valley, and I have a foot in each of these three camps. I'm a hiker, a biker, and a horseback rider. And it's great to see what the progress that you've made with this program. So I would say full speed ahead. Let's get it going, get it on the books, and start spending some money on these trail improvements and restoration. And then one other thing, I know every user now these days has one of these in their pockets or in their backpacks. And is there any way to monitor through trail use heat maps, that sort of thing? You may use Strava Metro already, but because I would think not only would that be good for me, if I'm out there, I want to, certain days I may want to avoid going in areas if I'm on a horse or I'm on a bike, whatever. And it would also be a great tool for staff to use on a daily, weekly basis. Where are the trails that are getting the most use that you really, really know and have some hard data to work with? Thanks.
Thank you.
Walter, please. Then Caroline Chrisman, Peter Hively.
My name is Walter Mzervi. I moved to San Anselmo in 1988 and bought my first mountain bike in 1989. I've been living here and bicycling since then, so I guess you could say that I'm well marinated. But anyway, I applaud the efforts of the staff and of the board. I know it's a very difficult, very involved process, and I'm very, very grateful as a bicyclist. And I hope that I can, now that I'm retired and I've gotten old, in order to keep on riding, I have to switch to a mountain bike, an e-bike, and I hope that I'm allowed to continue doing that, provided that I follow the guidelines and rules that the staff sets. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline Chrisman, please, Peter Hively, and Jasper Bayless.
First, thank you very much for the many opportunities for community engagement and for the chance to share comments today. I really appreciate how much habitat restoration is included in this plan, and including decommissioning of roads and non-system trails, and also the introduction of the watershed protection area concept, which is a great idea. One thing I did wonder about, similar to another speaker, is about the east side of Kent Lake, and I also for the first time heard today that there's PG&E access there and former logging roads. So I just think before planning a trail on that side of the lake, it would be really important to analyze the natural resources in that area and share that information and think about whether that is an appropriate location for a new trail. So going forward, I hope that habitat protection and restoration continue to be high priorities, and that trails are designed, installed, and maintained to limit erosion and protect adjacent habitat. And we look forward to seeing the plan go forward and having further opportunities for engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Hively, Jasper Bayless, and Amy Worth.
Hello, I'm Peter Hively. I've been hiking and biking on Mount Tam my whole life. I'm on the mountain most days of the week, and I enjoy the open space all around me. In my entire life, I've had no significant conflict with anyone on the trail. I've never injured myself. I've never injured anybody else. I know we can share the trails. I do it most days of the week. Everybody's having a nice time out there. As another speaker said, some of the problems we hear about in these meetings, I just don't see them out in the real world. We heard from the ranger that the Liberty Gulch Trail is running smooth. There have been no significant conflicts. That's my experience everywhere I go, and I think it will continue to do so. I have been participating in the process the last little bit. I've been to all the site visits and all the community meetings. I think the staff has done a wonderful job. Yes, some of the games with the dots have been a little confusing, but when I sat and took some time and figured out what it was we were trying to accomplish, it wasn't that difficult. I certainly wish I had more dots, but I did the best I could with what I had. And the process may not be perfect, but I think we've gained a lot of information from the community, and I think that's really important. And I appreciate everybody's hard work, and I look forward to seeing the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, directors, and thank you for this time to comment. My name is Jasper Bayless. I certainly have not been living here since the 80s. I was born in 2005. I've also been riding a mountain bike my entire life. In fact, most of my friends I made on the high school mountain biking team. Right now, this watershed has 17 miles of trails that equestrians and hikers can use, and bikes don't have any. And I'm super duper single track trails. Let's be clear, the fun ones. I'm super excited about all of these plans to make more trails that are healthy for this ecosystem that people like me can enjoy coming up through high school as high school mountain biking and juniors on mountain bikes continue to explode. I want to make my comments pretty quick here. I have a couple statistics that I think are important that I want everybody to be thinking about while we talk about this. The most useful source that I found is Marin Water's 2022 visitor census data that we referenced earlier. 1,763 people were asked what they were doing, I guess, in the, not I guess, sorry, that is the question. Their primary reason for being in the watershed. Of those people, 725, that's the super majority, 41%, said that they were hiking. 285 said that they were biking. 182 said that they were walking dogs. 118 said they were running. The list goes on. At the bottom, we have 4 who were horseback riding. I think that this is a pretty important statistic to consider as we bicker back and forth about riding horses versus riding mountain bikes. I think everybody has a place in this ecosystem. I don't want anybody to dismantle equitable access to trails. I just want us to build equitable access to trails that reflects the current user environment. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Amy Worth, Linda Novi, and Alicia with the last name and last initial Z.
Good evening, directors and staff. Thanks again for letting us voice our opinions. One thing I've noticed is that the plan has progressed since the December meeting and the March and June meeting is I think, and maybe it wasn't in writing, but the original intent was maybe opening up 0 to 35 miles of trails, single track trails to bikes. These numbers are significantly more. And I agree with the speaker who said, where is the, low access, more restoration? I think I expressed to you, Sean, that doesn't necessarily make sense. So I'm also concerned to hear the consultant say, when you, on the May 30th event, the majority voted on opening up these trails, and the majority voted on opening up the access. You're using absolute numbers. I think a more appropriate methodology would be relative, because you also remember, for example, Northside Trail had by far the most red dots on it, as did opening up Kent Lake to new access, and even the Pumpkin Ridge. So I think we understand that there are more mountain bikers, better organized, providing their input to you. I think you as a board want to be careful about sticking to your original mandate, protecting the habitat, enhancing it so we have water in a very troubled future, and not necessarily vote, as someone mentioned, by popularity. So for you to use the term the preferred alternative on the number 3 option with the most access, I thought was highly inappropriate and not fact-based. So I would like the board to remember that many other users, like families with young children, which I'm glad you asked about, elderly people or hikers who aren't part of a well-funded organization, may not have had a chance to give their voice. And it's up to you as directors, subject to a higher mandate, to honor that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Novi without my reading glasses, so bear with me. I want to say, and I'm on the board of Marin Horse Council, and I'm going to speak for Horses, the minority visitation group, I guess, on Mount Tam. And I want to thank directors that asked about equestrian access, and thank you, Sean, for acknowledging, some of the things that we've talked with you about. Before I get into that, I just want to also encourage us to start using the word visitor instead of user. I have always hated that. User is a technical term. You're going to use it up and spit it out. No, we're visitors. Let's show respect and stewardship in how we refer to ourselves. Tread lightly on the land. We're visitors. If I understand what you've proposed, Sean and Adam, equestrians are going to lose about 17 miles. Or excuse me, we're going to lose about 13 miles of trail access. And so I'd appreciate maybe some time to sit down and look at that. And it seems like, and you can later tell me if I'm right or wrong, that it's because you're creating a new hiker-biker group. And equestrians have always been able to share trails with hikers. And I don't know where this new designation is coming from and what the goal is. If it's much more narrow trails that you get points for more restoration, but you don't have to accommodate the potential for equestrian use. That's my guess. The road to trail conversions, you're mentioning maybe 4 feet wide, even down to 2 feet wide. My experience with some of those conversions is that when they start out at 4 feet, they narrow down to 2 feet really fast. And they do require some maintenance. An example, Marin County Parks, Big Rock Trail, narrowed down, very, very narrow, hard to use, everybody out there. Thank you.
Do you want to finish your sentence? Do you have
No,
one?
I'm
Okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Sakurls, I apologize.
Don't worry about it. No one ever gets it. Hi, I'm Alicia Zeckerly. I'm born and raised in this county. I have been using trails in this county literally since the day I was born. My mom popped me in the backpack and got me out there. I'm going to say this is important for what I'm going to say next. I haven't been on a bike since I was in early elementary school. I'm a lifelong horsewoman. I'm a fourth-generation horsewoman. I have been riding these trails from when I was a little bitty child led on a pony until now as a starting to enter middle-aged adult. I support putting bikes on these trails. We can share. I come from a very tiny little community of people that are still riding horses in this county, and I am blessed and so lucky to be able to be on these trails, but that doesn't mean that I don't think we should be sharing these trails with the vast number of people in this room who care deeply about the environment, who care deeply about trail maintenance, and want to ride their bikes on these trails. I have ridden my horse around bikes, around motorcycles, around dirt bikes. I don't have a problem. I'm not sure why the people who have been standing up for equestrians for so long seem to think that this is a barrier that cannot possibly be overcome. I think that is incorrect, and I look forward to continuing to share these trails for decades to come with all sorts of users, including cyclists on single track trails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Vendetti, Jamie Mackey, and Mitch Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Mark Vendetti. As a mountain biker and lover of our watershed since 1971, I fully support and appreciate the work that Marin Water is putting into this planning. Thank you very much for everything you're doing. I applaud Marin Water's inclusive process to arrive at a plan which attempts to create more equitable bicycle access and protects and improves the environment. I know we can share the trails. I've been doing it all my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie Mackey, please. Mitch Greenberg.
Hello, board. I would consider myself a nature lover and an environmentalist and a family person with young kids that I drag to these meetings. We've been enjoying the watershed since we've been here. I don't think it matters if I've been here since 1930 or for 2 months. But what I would like to, I've got 2 points I'd like to express. One is that I see a lot of gray hair in the room. And I think that if we don't increase access to watershed, that we will not increase value that these older folks like me feel in the watershed and love the nature. And I think we've got a big generational gap. And if we don't address that by increasing access, and people will create a value for what we love. And if we don't do that, we're not going to see it. And my 8-year-old will be talking about putting houses on the watershed and building desalination plants. The second point is our family uses the watershed for everything. We rock climb, we hike, we mountain bike. When we go home this summer, my 8-year-old will probably get put on a horse the first time because my mom loves horseback riding. She, like somebody else said, that she rides with bikes all the time. Not here, she's from Virginia, but it is possible to have this access. And just in the little bit of time that I've seen the access increase with trails like Eagle Rock, we're hiking that trail all the time, we're biking it. It has been nothing but a pleasurable experience to meet other people in the community. And I think that it's going to be really easy once this becomes normalized. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitch Greenberg. Okay. Natalie Mendez, Stephen McDaniel, and Vernon Huffman. Natalie? Stephen? After Stephen, Vernon Huffman, and then Bill Keene.
Good evening, board and staff. Steve McDaniel, board president, Marin Trail Stewards. First, I want to commend the staff for their diligent work, in this process. It's not easy, and too often reasonable progress ends up bogged down or altogether stopped in the name of environmentalism and conservation. Let me be clear, Marin Trail Stewards, mountain bikers, we are environmentalists. We know every inch of our open spaces. We know the soil quality in every season. We know the rocks, the waterfalls, the redwood groves. We know where the best wildflowers are. We know how to find complete solitude. We may, more than any other user group, know the importance of good trail design, building, and stewardship. Modern trail design has so much more to offer other than just smiles, though smiles and hoots should be the goal. Through good trail design and planning, we can make safe, sustainable trails that allow the community to access our open spaces in reverence of nature through recreation, be that on foot, on hoof, with a dog, or on wheels. We all want to protect this amazing place. Look around Marin at the trails that mountain bikers steward. These are among the most used trails in the county, and they are adored by hikers, dog walkers, runners, and bikers alike. Thank you, staff, for your dogged pursuit of community engagement and for proposing reasonable, sustainable access to the watershed. Your proposal is fair and balanced. It allows trail users of all disciplines to have a variety of exciting recreation opportunities, provides trail connectivity, and decreases impact to critical environmental areas. I encourage staff to continue to look at social trails, not only as potential system trails, but also for insight into the type of experience that users are seeking. We know there's no perfect solution. Some will be disheartened and frustrated, but we're hopeful that this time, the loudest voices in the room won't be the ones who are catered to, but instead the voice of the community will be reflected in the spirit of this plan. And as Marin's trail stewards, we're here to help build this vision and to steward these trails for all of Marin's trail users. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vernon Huffman, Bill Keene, and Tom Boss.
Hello, thank you. Vernon Huffman, Executive Director of Marin Trail Stewards. I just wanted to, the comments have been good tonight. I don't need to repeat them, but I do want to address two things that the directors have said tonight. First of all, Director Cush, it is difficult to be alienated from the trail systems of Mount Tam. And 65 miles that we have not have access to for all these years. I moved here in 92. So for 30 plus years to not have access has been difficult. So I have, as you know, I have worked hard over the decades to change that. What I've heard in these workshops is that the trails are in bad shape. And there's a correlation here. The mountain bike community has been alienated, yet we are a strong and large workforce. We really want to get accepted into the trail system, into access of the mountain. We really want to get busy and help. There's also what wasn't mentioned tonight, not just the bad shape of the trails, but the broom problem out there. And one thing that I've always promoted is my mountain bike roundup commitment. And when I have access to the trails, I not only work on the trail bed, but I take my volunteers and I send them both sides of the trail. We'll pick the corridor. Hey, from this creek to this ridge, let's pull the broom. And every one of these people here that's worked for me knows that that's a commitment. They don't all like it. It's really hard work, but they'll do it because that's our commitment to sustainable trails, sustainable ecosystem. And to Director Russell's comment, how are we going to pay for this? We're here. We're ready to go. We've been alienated, but that doesn't have to remain that way. As we get accepted into your community, into the trails community of the mountain, that's where we can come in and help. And we can help, we can do a unique MOU where we adopt trails and we take in we offset the budget with our skill set and our labor force. So we're here to help and we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, board. Good morning. Good evening, board. I want to thank staff for their hard work. This is an amazing plan, and I want to thank your board for the courage to move this along. I'm going to say ditto to the last two guys. I'm on the board of Marin Trail Stewards, but I'm going to speak more from my heart because I've lived in Marin my entire life, save for a few years. I started as a wee lad. My dad would take me hiking up on the mountain, and we'd get water at the springs just at the top of Hukuiku. As a teen, I saved my money and bought my first mountain bike when I was 15 in 1984. That tells you how old I am. In my 20s and early 30s, I ran ultra marathons and I traipsed all over the mountain and loved every minute of it. And as I got older, couldn't do that anymore because you're going to break down. So I started riding a bike again, and I realized I had nothing to ride. What you're doing today is giving me a place to go ride. I'm an advanced rider, as many in this room are, and we really have nowhere on the mountain to ride. And you're giving us an opportunity to have places to ride again. And I thank you for it. My son is moving back here tomorrow from Utah, which I'm thrilled about, and told him about this plan today. And he's on his way back from Utah pulling a trailer with his bike in it. And what he said was, gracias. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't wait to ride these trails and help you maintain them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, directors. Tom Boss. First, I just want to thank all of you for kind of your can-do attitude and in supporting this process. Staff over here and the consultants have presented a balanced and holistic approach, and it's aligned with a lot of other similar plans that have had successful outcomes. I think you've got a good base to start with here. I was not planning on speaking tonight until John Boshin got up here and said a few words. And what he reminded me is that there are thousands of John Boshins in Marin County, people who are residents or ratepayers. They visit the mountain, every week they're up there on the mountain, but they follow the rules. They stay on the designated routes. They may be a little frustrated by it, but they do the right thing. And if you push this plan forward, you're going to activate those people to do exactly what some of you have pointed out. They're going to do the policing. They're going to do the stewarding. They're going to make great relationships with some of the people that have concerns and show that we can solve these problems. So anyway, I was just very inspired by that comment and decided to get up here and say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now online I have Jeffrey Guild, Jake Inman, and then Jack Durkin. So Mr. Guild.
Yeah, good evening, board and staff. My name's Jeff Gild. I live in Fairfax. Tonight, I urge you to look past user group emotion and focus, or I should say visitor group emotion, and focus on process sequence, data integrity, and fiscal responsibility. First, this discussion is legally premature. Understanding planning practices in CEQA, you can't evaluate management scenarios without an existing conditions baseline. And to my knowledge, no such report has been published for the public. The district is selecting solutions before defining the environmental variables. And the reason why this is a source of concern is it leaves the plan highly vulnerable to procedural CEQA challenge, like the last go around, just a couple years ago. Second, these scenarios, they mistake emotional friction for an unmanageable safety crisis. Trail safety is a legitimate engineering concern, but it's driven by site-specific geometry and speed differentials, not the mere presence of a specific visitor or user group. The structural solution is straightforward, and it's very simple. Bring all existing trails into the official system and rescind arbitrary user group restrictions on that footprint. If a trail segment is structurally sound, open it to all users. If a specific spot presents a localized risk like an unarmored creek crossing or sensitive habitat or blind corner, address it directly with proven engineering solutions. Install clear span footbridges, clear sight lines, or construct physical choke points to control speed. You fix the infrastructure footprint, you not ban the user or visitor. If a zone is truly too fragile or dangerous to protect, close it to all human presence entirely. Urge the board to pause these scenarios, publish a definitive baseline, recuse the district from arbitrary discrimination amongst user groups, and focus your budget strictly on fire road remediation. Focus your budget strictly on fire road remediation and targeted trail infrastructure fixes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jake Inman, please, and then Jack Durkin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to pipe in quickly and say that I really appreciate what the board is doing. I really appreciate Sean, all that you've done for the last half decade plus on these sorts of things. I would encourage the board to, if they have time, look back over the YouTube of this meeting thus far, and you'll see that 6 out of 6 of the voices that went well over their allotted 2-minute time were of a certain category of trail user that also seems to want more access to the mountain than the rest of us have. And I just want to remind everyone that, that same group came with a disingenuous approach to these negotiations last time we did this. And I just hope the board keeps that in mind. I hope they keep that in memory. I hope they know who's really truly, speaking in good faith here. And I think it's the people who really do want to step up and work on these trails and make this equitable access happen. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jack, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to come in. I originally wasn't going to say anything, but after hearing all of the other people's comments, I grew up in Marin. I'm in my 20s and I've, spent most of my young adult life and childhood biking here. And one day I hope to raise a family here. And one thing that Marin lacks is fun things for kids to do. I mean, when I was growing up, everyone always said how boring Marin was for kids. We have an aging population, and I don't think that's how it has to be. But I think one of the biggest things is not only has increasing trail usage, whether that's building the bike park up in Stafford Lake or all the great work and advocacy that we've had with Eagle Rock and all those new multi-use trails, but building these new sustainable trails not only causes people to sort of see how land can be stewarded in a responsible way, but it also allows for people to understand how you see your community, you see your community members, and how your sense of self is sort of reflecting on each other. Another thing that I wanted to say was that it's kind of impossible to disconnect the history of us on the mountain, animals on the mountain, and this sort of place where we live from each other. People have been here, people hike on the mountains all the time, people are riding their horses on the mountains all the time. It's not an issue of people being in these places, but it's an issue of equitable access. I mean, mountain bikers are one of the largest volunteer groups in Marin when working on trails. Mountain bikers are one of the largest user groups in Marin on these trails. And mountain bikers are one of the largest, community supporters economically, socially. We have large events in Fairfax that are put on, centered around mountain biking in the community. So I think bringing this user group in as a legitimate means of community engagement is really large. And I want to thank Tom and Vernon and all them for their great comments and great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, please. Jeff? Okay, Krista. Oh,
Hello, this is Jeff's wife, Kathy Curtis, and I just want to strongly say that Sunnyside is a very special trail, and I feel that opening it up to bikes creates a bit of conflict of use, especially if you want to add folks that are disabled or need special access. They're slow to move aside. And I have had issues with bicycles going by too quickly, and you have to step aside off the trail for them to get by you. It's not incumbent on them to get out of your way. So, but otherwise, I think, you've done some great work, and I really would appreciate reconsidering or looking strongly at the Sunnyside. It's a special trail for all users of, but bicycles is not appropriate for that trail. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Krista Hoff, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you again for echo all the comments about thank you for all of the work that's gone into this. It's been a huge effort over so many years, and I appreciate all the opportunities to see the trails in person. I feel like that has also been an incredible experience to be on the trail together and find that we have a lot in common with each other. And that experience I've found is miles away from what these meetings seem to conjure up. And I've really appreciated the time that we've gotten to see the trail and hike the trail together and talk about the potential and the opportunity there. And I appreciate also the prioritization of the environmental benefits. That seems like an obvious thing that we should all be be supporting. Also, the safety of bicyclists by getting cyclists off the road. I think that's a huge benefit that we can all should all be supporting. It's not fun to ride on the road. It's not fun to drive behind a bike on the road. It's benefits everybody if there are alternatives to road connections. And I just wanted to also appreciate the experiences that this scenario offers to kids. I have 2 little kids, and there's not a lot of places that I can take them to ride, and I look forward to having more options for taking my family as well. So thank you again.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Anyone else in the room would like to speak? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and move to board member comments and then direction for staff. Would anyone like to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Thank you, team, for your presentation, your very thoughtful work. A couple of reactions to some of the public comments this evening that I think should be considered. One is I do think an increased focus and attention to enforcement is important. I do think that we can be thoughtful about seasonal restrictions and impact of our trails on our lands. I think that I love the idea of calling it visitors, not users. Let's change our lexicon. I think it was pretty clear that the DOT effort could have been done better. So maybe we revisit that and get some more public engagement about what different opportunities were. I want to speak specifically to the group of people who are not making comments tonight, but who were the litigants from our last effort. And I'm actually surprised they're not here in some ways, but some ways I'm not surprised. Okay. Oh, maybe you were part of the lawsuit. Yeah. So thank you for speaking up. So then I'm speaking to you as well, possibly. The ask was very clear that they wanted more community engagement, and we did it. I mean, abundant amount of community engagement, and I am so thankful and for your team and your effort to do that. That was critical, and I think it was lacking last time, and we're not done. We're just getting going, and there's a lot more to go. The second is that what I heard was that a strong desire to have zones for land management. And it is not greenwashing to propose thousands of acres to be protected land for the first time ever in Marin history. Thousands of acres to be preserved and not used. It's not greenwashing to say that we're going to reduce many dozens of trails that are social trails that are harmful to our environment, 60 miles of trails that are going to be restored. That's not greenwashing. That's a really thoughtful environmental effort that's been decades in the making. It is absolutely not greenwashing to do a full environmental review and CEQA process like we are doing. We're going deep, and I hope we do it right. I appreciate the Fairfax comment about his concerns about us not doing it right. So, Molly, back to you to make sure we're going to be doing this process as absolutely buttoned up as possible. That is critical, and I understand how the pilot didn't do that, and now I think we're doing it right. So that's not greenwashing, and I sure appreciate that. But instead of working with us, millions of dollars have been spent in staff time and our ratepayers' money that has gone to lawyers, not to fixing the environment. So I implore the folks who sued us and who looks like, by many of them not being here right now, are planning to do it again, that you think twice about it. Maybe you can take the millions of dollars that our ratepayers are paying your lawyers and use that towards research in native plants, research on how to help protect the spotted owl, research on how to help better coho salmon. We can actually not waste all of this money and time, but partner with you to do it better. And that's what I think this group is doing. So I'm hopeful that as board members, we're not looking out just for horseback riders or for our endemic thistles. We're looking out for all of it. And so it's our job to have a balanced approach, and we're going to do our best that we possibly can to do that. And I'm very supportive of the direction you're going. I know it's going to change. Not everyone's going to be happy, but you guys sue us again, and I'm prepared to back us up. And I hope you don't, and instead take the millions of dollars that'll be wasted and put that towards really, really, really thoughtful stewardship of our land. Thank you.
Not really sure how to follow that up. But it's a little bit, it may be not surprising that I had similar thoughts to Jed, maybe not as eloquently expressed, but, you know, I feel like this whole discussion has largely been really positive regarding the work that staff and consultants have done to come up with a preferred scenario for moving forward that takes into account community feedback to, I think, very high levels. And we're all hopeful now that we're on a good track forward. But I'm also reminded through all of this about a comment that someone gave me as I first joined the Marin Water Board. And this is from someone with much, much more experience than I have in public projects, public works, service provision. And he said, you know, the issue is, if you want to block a project, you don't try to kill it on the merits. You just force the government or the agency to conduct more and more environmental studies until politicians or developers run out of patience or money. Behind countless major projects is an expensive war of attrition. I'm not sure that we're past that point yet, but I really, really hope I'm wrong, and we are. Thanks a lot, Sean, Adam, Carl, for all of the great work to bring us to this preferred scenario, and I really hope that we can at least agree today to take it to the next steps that you've outlined. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Russell.
In the interest of time, I'm only going to say one thing, which is thank you all for coming.
Director Mayer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
I just wanted to also echo that I so appreciated all the really good comments tonight, and I really appreciated that we had, it sounded to me like an unusual amount of agreement on a lot of important things. So I was very encouraged. Thank you. And thank you to our incredible staff for all their hard work.
Great, thank you. You know, when I was thinking about this effort now, and this is really Act 2 for this current board on trying to take a look at this challenge that we're facing, or opportunity is probably a better word on how to improve. I kept thinking this is a evolution in district history, not a revolution. But after looking at it for a little while, that's not true for me anymore in terms of the entire project or actual process. And what I mean by that is, this is a revolution in environmental protection on the watershed. When we look at 10% exclusion zone for human activity, where else in this county has that happened? Who else is being bold enough to understand the importance of their land and taking that action? And that is only a component of it, because I hear the frustration about tying heavy access to heavy restoration, but what does really heavy access mean when you look at it? And what is heavy restoration doing? We are attacking and looking at trails that were not designed with the environment as primary. And we are going to be removing those from the system, allowing Mother Nature to go back in and heal herself over and over again so that we can have a more productive watershed, a better environment. These are not just insignificant steps. These are really big moves, and I think we all owe Director Smith appreciation for his concept of bringing this forward. And now that it's gaining traction, we actually have an actionable item to bring forward as a part of a comprehensive look at this entire program. Addressing the safety component. Safety is a big deal. And this board took action prior to the last attempt, and that was to increase fines for illegal use significantly. And so the consequence now of doing something illegal is much greater than it was before, because we understand that safety should be considered at all times. But safety also figures into the trail network. None of these were designed with safety in mind. We have the opportunity to now address that moving forward and make things more safe than they are right now, which I think is, for me, a huge win. But it's also important to put into context what we're talking about. We can use percentages because it actually probably tells the best story, but what percentage of the 22,000 acres of watershed are we talking about? These trails, do they make up 10%, Sean, of the watershed that we're dealing with? The trails that are under consideration right now, is it a 10% figure?
The footprint of those trails is probably less than 10%.
Right, so we're already taking 10% of the watershed and protecting it, and then looking at less than that number to actually take a look at. So again, revolutionary? No, evolutionary as we look to continue to build. We have an opportunity to improve. We have the opportunity to make what's out there better. We have the opportunity to deconflict areas and move forward. That's powerful. And shame on us if we miss the opportunity to make things better on the watershed, improve what we're doing right now as an entire process, as opposed to just trying to fight for individual areas of interest where we'd like to be. Looking at it in its entirety is a much more responsible way to move forward on that. I did want to start giving a little bit direction, because I think it's an opportunity for us to give direction based on the preferred option that you move forward for that. I do want to look, like I mentioned earlier, at the northern end of the exclusion zone, and I'd like to hear from staff. Is there a slice of that we could look to remove pending some potential future access up there? And if we need to make up for the acres on the north or the south end, do it that way. I think that's a fair way of doing it. Looking in it, and I'm going back to Pumpkin Ridge and Madrone, and I want to make sure I understood what you said earlier about the number of users on those trails. You said monthly?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was the roughly three users on it month. Okay, but I do think we should look at Sunnyside. I think we need to really look at it from an environmental perspective first. I mean, you talked about some challenges with it already, but if there's a lot of folks that members of the community that are already concerned about that I think it deserves a little bit closer look, and potentially could fall into the trail category of the ones that you are not proposing to move forward. But I'd like to hear from other board members on that too, if there's any other comments or direction. As the plan as it is, if not, we'll go ahead and take it as the preferred plan as the direction to move forward with.
I think, just to repeat, Sean, if we could take a look at Lake Lagunitas management strategy.
Definitely happy for us to relook at Sunnyside as well. Thank you. That makes sense to me.
Director Russell, I know you were pretty clear on your comment, but anything else pop up? Okay. Director Mayer, any last comments? Great. Okay. Sean, is there any further direction you need from us as a board?
Nope, that's good. So just to reiterate next steps, we're going to start advancing towards our notice of preparation, our scoping. So August, September timeframe, probably mid-September when we have that next community meeting, and that'll be another opportunity for engagement. And then we'll continue to do the studies in the background.
Great. And in closing, I think everyone deserves the respect of a thank you from this board, myself personally, for engaging this process, taking time out of your weekends, taking time out of your nights, taking time to email, taking time to meet with board members, reach out. I think this is a very comprehensive process, and we encourage the continued participation, continued communication, and continue moving forward. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunn.